Chapter 1095. Wow, my sisters are telling a story. Let's go and join in the fun. When Yang Yi was about to arrange who would tell the story for the two girls, Murphy's laughter was heard. He, she, and Lan Xian all turned their heads and saw Murphy walking towards them with a smile. She was even carrying a small stool that Tong Tong usually sat on. Tong Tong was already running in front of them excitedly. The little guy's steps were not big, but his pace was really fast. Like a small French sports car, he ran over with a whoosh. He ran to the middle of everyone and the screen before he stopped to look at his sisters. He opened his mouth and smiled, revealing a few white teeth. It was very cute. Come, let's sit here and watch. We can't disturb my sisters. Murphy pulled Tong Tong and led him to sit on the side. Murphy knew that Yang Yi wanted to teach Lan Xian and Shi about values, so she also brought Tong Tong over. Although Tong Tong might not be able to understand, he might be influenced by him. Back on track, Yang Yi suggested, "How about this? Since you all like to tell the story of the second painting, let's play rock paper scissors. Whoever wins will tell the story of this painting. The loser can't be sad because the story of the first painting has a lot of room for improvement." This suggestion was quite fair. Shi and Lan Xian both agreed. After a round of rock paper scissors, Shi lost. She sighed regretfully and gave her seat to Lan Xian. Of course, although the little girl felt regretful, she didn't care too much. She said generously, "Then, Xian Air will tell the story of the giant panda." Lan Xian was full of joy, but when she stood in the middle and wanted to tell the story, she realized that she didn't seem to remember the story. She scratched her head and looked at Mr. Yong awkwardly. She said embarrassedly, "But I'm not ready yet." "Where's Shi? Do you want to prepare for a while?" Yang Yi looked at Shi and said with a smile, "Why don't you tell the story first?" Shi's interest was immediately piqued. She didn't even think about preparing anything. She ran over happily. "Okay. I'll tell you a story. Little brother and mama are listening too. Give your sister a round of applause." Murphy held Tong Tong's hand and patted it with a smile. Shi's storytelling ability had been honed over the years. Therefore, even though the little girl did not jump up and down in an ostentatious manner, her little face was brimming with a confident smile. As she had just returned from a walk, Shi was a little sweaty. The sweat on her cheeks stuck to a few strands of her hair, making her look extraordinarily beautiful. The rarest thing was that her calm gaze and expression actually had some of the aura of Murphy on stage. It was a very, very long time ago. The little girl used the most common opening that her father used to tell her stories. She naturally cut into the story. A few people were taking a walk. Yang Yi was stunned. How could it be a walk? However, he smiled and did not interrupt Shi's free speech. But the sun was so hot. They wanted to rest for a while. Then they went to rest under the tree. Shi pointed at the picture on the screen and spoke with assurance even though she did not have a rich vocabulary. Then one of them climbed the tree because there were fruits on it. "It's pear. It's snow pear. It's very sweet." Lan Xian recognized the words below and hurriedly reminded her little friend. Yes. It's snow pear. I want to eat snow pear." She smiled and nodded to her little friend. Following that, Cece's story was basically about reading the dialogue. There were some words that she didn't know. The little girl even stopped and asked her father about it. The person sitting under the tree also said, "No, the pear tree belongs to someone else." "No," he said, "that the pear tree does not have an owner, but in my heart, it belongs to someone else." As she read, she scratched her head in confusion. She could not wrap her head around it. Yang Yi did not bat an eyelid. He waited for Shi to finish the story. Then he smiled and pressed his hands together, indicating that Murphy and Lan Xian should not be in a hurry to applaud. He said, Shi, it's not over yet." "It's over. Is there more?" She turned her head to look at the screen behind her, puzzled. Then she turned back to look at her father in confusion. "Do you remember when I tell you stories? When we tell a story, we don't just tell a story. At the end of the story, we also have to make a small summary. For example, what does this story tell us? Yang Yi said with a smile. She also remembered when her father reminded her. She suddenly understood and nodded. Then, the little girl showed a sad expression. Her delicate eyebrows drooped, and her beautiful big eyes showed a trace of reluctance. She unwillingly crossed her two little hands in front of her body, twisted her waist, and begged, "Papa, then can I say more? I want a reward. I want to invite everyone to see the dolls." It turned out that she thought a little too much. She thought that her father had already determined that she was not a good storyteller by pointing out the flaws in her storytelling. Yang Yi, who had never thought of that at all, couldn't help laughing. He organized his words, and then said gently, "Of course you can. If you work hard to tell our story completely, it's also an improvement." Shi's mood turned for the better, and she happily showed a sweet smile. "Then I'll say it. This story tells us that we can't pick the pear trees planted by others. If we want to eat them, we have to plant them ourselves. I can plant potatoes, and I can also plant very sweet pear trees." She spoke more and more fluently, and her eyes were shining with excitement. She said, "Yes, we can't eat other people's pear trees, because they were planted by other people with painstaking efforts. I planted radishes, and one of them was spoiled by a bun. I feel terrible." Shi's performance was really beyond Yang Yi's expectations. In fact, Yang Yi only hoped that she could make a conclusion by herself. In this way, she could have a deeper impression of the story and this principle. However, Yang Yi did not expect that Cici would be able to imagine what had happened to her in the past and describe the feelings of a victim by putting herself in his shoes. Very good. Yang Yi sincerely applauded Shi, and he couldn't help but praise her. Shi, I'm really happy for you because you can summarize so much. Look, your story is very complete, isn't it? Shi received her father's praise, and also received applause from her mother, brother, and Lan Xian. She stood there a little embarrassedly, and then she giggled. "Papa Yang, did she tell a good story? Can we visit the doll factory now?" Lan Xian asked curiously. "That's right, this is the key." She didn't care about being happy at this moment. She raised her little head and looked at her father anxiously. Her little face was a little tense, and she was very nervous as she waited for her father's decision. Of course, she has already received her reward. Yang Yi looked at Lan Xian with a smile and said, "Then, now it's your turn, Xer. Whether or not you can go to Taiwan with us to eat delicious food depends on whether your story is good or not." After listening to the first half of the story, she was just about to smile when Lan Xian interrupted her joy. Then I still have to prepare for a while. Shi, come here. Let me tell you, you have to help me." The two little girls gathered together and started to whisper. Chapter 1096. What were they talking about? Actually, Yang Yi didn't even need to try his best to eavesdrop. He could tell from Lan Xian's anxious look that she was looking for Shi for help. After all, Shi was an expert when it came to storytelling. It was as if Lan Xian was also an expert when it came to talking about what was delicious. After a while, the two girls looked radiant. After she finished a story, she turned around and ran upstairs. Lan Xian looked at the stairwell for a while, as if she was waiting for Shi to come down. Tong Tong didn't have that much patience. He looked at her in confusion for a while and thought that his sister had run out to play. He couldn't sit still on the stool and wanted to stand up. Murphy pulled him back, but he still cried out unwillingly. "Don't worry. Sister will be back soon. We still want to listen to Sister Xian's story." Murphy had no choice but to take the little boy back into her arms. Okay. Let's not wait for Shi. I want to tell the story first." After a while, Lan Xian seemed to have seen something. She shouted and ran back to the middle of the side hall, looking as if she wanted to speak freely. Murphy was a little surprised. She asked, "Why aren't you waiting for Shi?" Let Shishi watch you tell the story too. Lon Xian wanted to say something but hesitated. She stammered, "Oh no, we can't wait for Shishi. We want to tell the story first." Yang Yi raised his eyebrows slightly and looked at Lon Xian with amusement. When Lon Xian ran back, Yang Yi clearly heard Shishi's footsteps coming down the stairs. Although Shishi deliberately slowed down her footsteps, the footsteps were relatively light. But who was Yang Yi? How could these footsteps be hidden from him? Alright, Xian Air, tell us your story. We're all ready to listen to it. I believe that she can also listen to your story. Yang Yi decided to help these two mysterious girls. However, his last sentence was meaningful. Lon Xian didn't get the hint, but Murphy had a sudden realization and was trying hard not to laugh. Alright then, I'm going to tell you a story. Lon Xian nodded happily and said generously, "There's a farmer uncle who grows a lot of watermelons." For some reason, Yang Yi heard she pacing back and forth anxiously in the stairwell. Regardless of she, Lon Xian was telling a story. Her storytelling style was relatively concise. There were no superfluous words, but her hands were gesturing. It was as if the little girl was also in the story. She gesticulated the round shape of the watermelon with her hands and feet. If it were she would probably use a lot of adjectives or details to describe it. However, Lon Xian was very straightforward and directly gesticulated. However, the effect was very good. Little Swan Tuan was very focused and did not struggle in his mother's arms. He was fully focused on Sister Lon Xian. Lon Xian seemed to have forgotten the words at the end. She was a little embarrassed and secretly glanced back at the TV screen. Then, she quickly turned back, as if she was worried that Mr. Yang would deduct points if he saw it. But the watermelon was eaten by a thief. The farmer uncle cried. Lon Xian said, "Then the farmer uncle wanted to catch the thief. The thief is here." Her story was really very simple. Lon Xian was yelling and pointing while winking at Cici, who was in the stairwell, hinting for her to hurry up and come out. Yang Yi seemed to understand something. He looked expectantly. Sure enough, a little girl wearing panda pajamas and a hoodie with two round and black little ears jumped out of the stairwell. Seeing this, Yang Yi knew that his guess was right. She really went upstairs to get panda pajamas. When they were at the panda base, She and Lon Xian liked all kinds of panda souvenirs. In addition to the dolls, they also bought panda pajamas. However, it was a hot day now, so she couldn't wear these woolen pajamas. Yang Yi had already washed them for Cici and put them back into her wardrobe, but he didn't expect that the little girl would still find them. Of course, the panda pajamas still had some effect. Mo Fei was dazed for a moment, and then covered her mouth and laughed. Little Momo, on the other hand, widened his big eyes and waved his little arms as if he couldn't recognize his sister. After a while, he took his mother's hand and muttered, "Sister." Meow meow. It wasn't just the people who reacted. The three fat British shorthairs who had been wagging their tails in boredom on the cat tree saw She, the panda, jump out. They were also elves and raised their heads on the cat tree. However, after looking for a while, they felt bored and went back to squinting their eyes. It wasn't clear whether they were sleeping or secretly observing. Steamed Bun wagged his tail and ran over, circling around twice. So it was the panda who ate the watermelon. Lon Xian said angrily, pointing at She with her hands on her hips. Cici, who was cooped up in her flannel pajamas, couldn't help but lift her hat at this moment. Her little face was drenched in sweat, and it was indeed very hot. However, this wasn't what Cici was anxious about. She took off her hat and pouted just to say the words that she had been holding back in the stairwell. "No, XNR, you haven't said anything yet. You have to turn on the light first to see that I'm a panda." She said. Oh. Yes, you have to turn on the light first. Lon Xian suddenly realized and quickly made a gesture to turn on the light. "There's more," She said anxiously. "You have to say from the beginning, a long time ago." It turned out that the little girl had been moving in the stairwell just now because of this. However, after saying it, She felt much better. After all, she had to tell a story from a long, long time ago. Yang Yi looked at Shi and didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He couldn't help but whisper, Shi, don't interrupt Xer. It's impolite. You have to let her finish the story first. Being polite was one thing. In fact, Yang Yi felt a little sorry for his daughter. She had to finish the story quickly and let Shi take off her thick pajamas. Seeing her sweaty forehead, Yang Yi couldn't sit still. Then, Lan Xin continued to tell the story. Of course, she didn't create many lines herself. She basically read the dialogue in the story. However, Lan Xin's performance and Shi's cooperation made the story lively and interesting. Especially the scene where Shi begged for mercy pitifully. The little girl bowed down and wriggled her little butt in the panda pajamas as she begged. You can punish me in any way you want. You can twist my ears, slap my hands, or kick my butt. Seeing this scene, Murphy and Yang Yi both laughed. Tong Tong seemed to keep up with her mother's rhythm and was beaming with joy. Finally, they finished the story. Yang Yi felt sorry for Shi and asked her to take off her pajamas. In this weather, the air conditioner was on. Shi was sweating profusely from the heat. She took off her pajamas, which were directly put on, and shouted, Xer, hurry up. You haven't finished yet. You have to finish the story. Otherwise, my papa won't give you good grades. But what's the conclusion? Lan Xin anxiously asked Shi for help. She really couldn't make up anything to say. Yang Yi smiled. He had already prepared a speech. He said, Xin, what do you think this story mainly explains? Lan Xin blinked and said, the panda damaged the farmer's watermelon. Is this the right thing to do? You just said that the panda was the thief who stole the farmer's watermelon. Yang Yi laughed. Of course it's wrong. How could it steal the farmer's watermelon? Lan Xin said indignantly, the farmer's watermelon was also very hard to grow. I've also grown vegetables, but it was very difficult to grow them. Perhaps it was because she had been inspired by Cece's previous conclusion, but Lan Xin also followed suit and analyzed the situation. This made Yang Yi a little surprised. He realized that his and teacher Li Rulan's judgment might be right. Because now it seemed that Lan Xin, this little girl, was quite righteous, and her previous behavior was just a small mistake that she didn't care about. That's right. Yang Yi smiled, clapped his fist, and said encouragingly, so, think about it in reverse. If the panda wants to eat watermelon, but it can't steal the farmer's watermelon, what should it do? If you can understand it, then you can tell us the truth of this story. Lan Xin was overjoyed. She giggled and rushed to say, I know. It's just that if a panda wants to eat a watermelon, it can't steal a farmer's watermelon. It should first ask the farmer, Uncle Farmer, I want to eat a watermelon. Can I have a watermelon? She was also on the side. She smiled and nodded her little head. Yes. Very good. In fact, if you can be better and tell the deeper meaning of these two stories, it would be even better. For example, these two stories tell us a very simple truth. We have to understand that what is ours and what is others. If it's ours, okay, no problem, it doesn't matter what you do with it. But if it's someone else's, such as the pear on the roadside or the farmer's watermelon, we try not to take it from others. But if we really want it, we have to take the initiative to ask others to see if they are willing to give it to us. This is a very basic etiquette and a moral code that must be followed. Yang Yi gestured to Shi and Lan Xin with a thumbs up, and said with a smile, of course. In fact, your performance tonight was very good. It exceeded my expectations. In the future, I can continue to practice your storytelling skills. These compliments made Shi and Lan Xin very happy. However, Lan Xin was still a little nervous. She looked at Father Yang eagerly, her little feet twisting on the ground, waiting to hear the sentence that she had been looking forward to the most. Since the goal of today had been achieved, Yang Yi certainly had to satisfy her. That's right, Shi and Xin both finished your stories very well tonight, so I think that you should both receive the rewards that I promised before. Before he finished speaking, Shi and Lon Xian couldn't wait to cheer. Yay! That's great, Xian Air can also go to Taiwan to play. He. Lon Xian was also so happy that she didn't know what to say. She hugged Shi and jumped up and down. Chapter 1097. Yang Yi hoped that the children could develop healthily and happily. Of course, for the worried Lan Hao Kai, after hearing Yang Yi's evaluation and confirmation, he was finally relieved. He handed over the family matters to Wu Jingjing and rushed back to Jinling City. There was a section of the project that was in the acceptance stage. There were some things that he needed to deal with personally. However, before Lan Hao Kai could go back, an uninvited guest came to Jinling City's Wu County on Tuesday morning. Hey, where are you from? This is a construction site. You can't just barge in. Han Sen had just stepped into the construction site of the first phase of the theme park. He had not even taken 2 photos before he was discovered. I'm a reporter. I'm here to interview your boss, Lan Hao Kai, President Lan. Han Sen was surrounded by a few construction workers who were wearing safety helmets. You're looking for President Lan? Go to Zhongqing to find him. He's a big boss. Do you think he'll eat, drink, and poop here like us workers? The workers looked at each other and laughed. Han Sen was not a real paparazzi after all. He was more of a technical nerd. He was experienced in writing, but he was slow in speaking. He stuttered and could not find a suitable excuse. In the end, he was brought out of the construction site on the grounds of safety. Of course, it was not impossible to use the word chased away to describe it. After all, Han Sen did not have the ability to resist. F***CKU. Han Sen paced back and forth outside the construction site and spat at the side angrily. However, he was still not satisfied. After thinking carefully for a while, Han Sen finally had a new idea. Maybe it was because he had watched too many movies. Han Sen went back to the city center of Wu County and found a shop that sold old-fashioned military uniforms. He bought a set of military uniforms and green rubber shoes that were the same as the construction workers at the construction site. He even found another shop and bought a yellow helmet. It had to be said that Han Sen's imagination was also very big. After buying these military uniforms, he ruthlessly rolled on the sand a few times while wearing them. The originally clean military uniform suddenly became dirty. Of course, Han Sen went all out. He even got some potash and smeared it on his face. This time, his face also darkened. Finally, in the afternoon, Han Sen used a disguise to sneak into the construction site. Everyone was busy working, and no one noticed a strange person sneaking in. Of course, Han Sen also walked along the edge. Gradually, he saw part of the completed project. F***CK. Han Sen couldn't help but exclaim softly. Whether it was the building of the frozen palace or the statue of the queen wielding ice magic, they were all extremely large in scale. Han Sen knew that this was a large-scale amusement park that Lan Hao Kai's company was building. This information was introduced in the news of Jinling City, but he didn't know that this large-scale amusement park actually made such a big scene. This should be the Palace of Frozen. Is it built on a 1-to-1 scale? Han Sen secretly used his clothes to cover his phone and took a few photos. He already knew a lot about Yang Yi. Moreover, it wasn't new news that the animated movie Frozen would be released during the summer vacation. They even made a poster for it. Moreover, Han Sen came to the construction site through the personal micro-broadcasting of some employees of Lan Hao Kai's company. He found out that this newly built large-scale amusement park of Lan Hao Kai's was related to Yang Yi's fairy tale works in terms of theme and content. This was not mentioned in the media reports. Of course, Han Sen didn't expect that Lan Hao Kai's side would make such a big deal. This frozen palace, without even approaching it, was extremely shocking just looking at it from afar. There's a lot of investment in this. I heard that it's divided into several phases, including an island. Han Sen took photos crazily while thinking secretly. No, it's not a lot, it should be a lot. Lan Zhao Kai can't possibly sell all his liquid funds or his shares in the Sahara Desert just to make this amusement park, right? From the current relationship between Yang Yi and Lan, they should both have invested. If only Lan bought Yang Yi's copyright, the expenses would be even higher. Han Sen's mind was spinning quickly, and he quickly grasped the main point. Yang Yi is also a child lover. He usually takes his children with him when he goes out. It's not impossible for him to invest a little money to make an amusement park for his children. It should be that Lan wants to make an amusement park, and he bought the land. He told Yang Yi, and the two of them hit it off. Han Sen, who had made up the main text, basically guessed the ownership of the amusement park, but there was little information. He couldn't believe it. In fact, this amusement park was Yang Yi's idea, and Lan Zhao Kai was only a shareholder and agent. Hey, what are you doing? You're not working, but wandering around here? Who's your foreman? Suddenly, there was a deep voice behind him, scaring Han Sen so much that he almost threw his phone away. I. Han Sen looked back and saw a construction worker, who was slightly better dressed and wearing a blue safety helmet, frowning and sizing him up. Han Sen suddenly became nervous. You're not from our construction site? The construction worker was responsible for directing the workers. He had worked with a lot of workers, so naturally, he could tell that something was wrong with Han Senator. He looked at him carefully, and finally, his eyes fell on Han Sen's white wrist, and his expression suddenly became serious. Half an hour later, Han Sen was kicked out again. Fortunately, Han Sen said that he was a resident nearby. The construction worker checked his belongings to make sure that he didn't steal the construction site's tools, didn't make things difficult for him, gave him a safety education, and told him not to come back again. Then, they let him go. They didn't even give me back my hat. Han Sen spat again. After all, his safety helmet was too similar to the construction site's, so others thought it was a safety helmet. Fortunately, this wasn't a big loss. Han Sen's phone and the photos inside were all kept. After leaving the construction site, he returned to the small hotel in Wu County. After taking a shower and changing his clothes, Han Sen broke free from his bad mood. He looked excited and said to himself, "It should be right. Yang Yi and Lan Zhao Kai have a deep partnership. Besides, there are also related companies like the Sahara Publishing House." It can be seen that the relationship between Yang Yi and Fu Jun is earlier and deeper than that between Lan Zhao Kai and Fu Jun. Han Sen was talking to himself as he quickly typed a draft on his laptop. The title of the draft was Sahara, Backwave, Super Amusement Park. Behind the scenes, show you Yang Yi, who built a business empire silently. He had prepared enough materials over the past few days, and now he was using them all. This time, he wanted to let the whole country know that he, Han Sen, was the man who was the best at digging for breaking news. Chapter 1098. At the beginning of the month, Sahara Online Mall acquired eBay and set up a new sub-brand, Sahara Taobao Online Mall. In just a month, Sahara Online Mall could be said to have expanded frequently. It was constantly recruiting and expanding its own staff. Similarly, Sahara Express was further expanding. Fu Jun gave Li Long a large number of slots to set up his own data processing team and strive to build an open logistics big data platform this year. Just like the rookie logistics in Yang Yi's previous life, using advanced big data processing technology to integrate logistics resources from different platforms to give users of Sahara Online Mall the best logistics experience. After all, after the Sahara Taobao Online Mall was opened, Sahara Group could no longer maintain its monopoly on logistics. They had to bring in more logistics companies to serve the many Taobao merchants. However, this did not matter. At present, Sahara Express was at the leading level in the industry. Li Long could proudly claim that no one could provide the same quality express delivery service as Sahara Express. However, by bringing in competitors, it would help stimulate Sahara Express to continue to improve and develop. What he wanted to talk about here was an old acquaintance, Mu Yuqing, Yang Yi's die-hard fan. Under such circumstances, Li Long asked the headhunting company to poach him to the Sahara Express with a high salary. In the previous company, Mu Yuqing was doing very well and did not have any conflicts with the boss. However, he had been a manager for a few years and had limited room for development. People in the IT industry also needed to jump up often in order to easily increase their value. Mu Yuqing used to be a loyal user of Sahara Online Mall. From the beginning, he was very interested in the operation model of Sahara Online Mall. Although Sahara Online Mall was not the one who poached him, it was the industry's big shot, Li Long, who wanted him. Mu Yuqing took advantage of the situation and jumped to Sahara Express with a high annual salary contract. He came to Sahara Express as the product director of a new product, Sahara Logistics Network. Although this was only a new project, as the product director, Mu Yuqing could be said to be an executive of Sahara Express. He was on the same level as the other department heads, or maybe even a level higher, depending on the future results of the product. This morning, after Mu Yuqing finished a meeting with a few product managers, he was busy holding his laptop and preparing to go to the technical team to take a look. Because it was a brand new product and a brand new logistics network platform, the burden on Mu Yuqing's shoulders was very heavy. Especially in the past few months, the first step had been difficult. He and the team had been very busy. However, at this moment, a female product manager who had also jumped over from somewhere else came over with a smile and said, "Mr. Mu, let me ask you a very gossipy question." Mu Yuqing responded in surprise. His heart, which was already in his 30s, still skipped a beat. "Is there really Yang Yi among the bosses of our company?" The girl revealed a familiar fangirl expression and asked with a grin, "Do you know who Yang Yi is? That man who's good at writing songs is Murphy's husband." Yang Yi. Mu Yuqing knew it too well. Before Yang Yi became famous, Mu Yuqing, who was also known as Mu Yuchen, had already become a hardcore fan of Yang Yi. At that time, this girl probably didn't even know who Yang Yi was. Mu Yuqing snorted in his heart, but he quickly reacted. "Ah! Yang Yi. Yang Yi is one of the bosses of our company?" Mu Yuqing asked in surprise, "Where did you find out about this?" The girl blinked and said, "On the internet. This morning, the news was all over the place." Mu Yuqing thought about it. He seemed to have been too focused on work these days. He really didn't have time to look at his phone. As he thought about it, he put on a straight face, coughed, and said, "Don't talk about this groundless news in the company. Be careful that Mr. Li hears about it and deducts your bonus." The girl stuck out her tongue in embarrassment and ran away with her tail between her legs. She actually knew that Mu Yuqing was deliberately putting on a straight face to maintain his position as a director. Usually, Mr. Mu was very good. Usually, when there was something, he would take care of it. He rarely let the rest of the team bear the pressure of the outside world. However, after the girl ran away, Mu Yuqing's curiosity rose. "When did Yang Yi become my boss?" Mu Yuqing couldn't hold back his curiosity. He went back to the office and looked up the news on the computer. It really was. The internet was full of reposts and reports of Han Sen's exposé, Sahara, Backwave, Super Amusement Park. Behind the scenes, restore to you Yang Yi, who built a business empire silently. The article was very long. Han Sen even inserted a lot of photo evidence in it. However, Mu Yuqing saw the photos of Sahara Publishing House in Zhongqing that Han Sen gave him, as well as the Children's Book Author Support Fund department that was funded by Yang Yi. Mu Yuqing was already 80% impressed by this exposé. One had to know that Mu Yuqing was Yang Yi's hardcore fan. Although Yang Yi first made a name for himself on Yuan literature website, Yang Yi's later books were all published through Sahara Publishing House. Mu Yuqing knew the trajectory of this change very well. Back then, this group of fans was worried that Yang Yi would fall out with Yuan literature website and affect the publication of his works. Mu Yuqing also remembered that the first time he came into contact with Sahara Online Mall was also because of Yang Yi's books. Mu Yuqing checked the time of the two financing of Sahara Online Mall online, as well as the establishment and development of Yang Yi's Backwave technology company. Sure enough, Mu Yuqing found that during the financing period of Sahara Online Mall, Yang Yi's net worth was more than a few $100 million. In other words, If Fu Jun needed money and Yang Yi did not have shares in Sahara Online Mall, Yang Yi did not need to look for Lanzhou Kai at all. He could invest for Fu Jun himself. Of course, the logic here also had the possibility that Yang Yi was short-sighted and let go of this opportunity. However, Yang Yi, who could create micro-broadcasting and WeChat, could not see the potential of Sahara Online Mall. Ever since Mu Yuqing found out that Yang Yi was the big boss of Backwave, he admired Yang Yi. Now, he was like a fangirl, firmly believing that Yang Yi must have seen the potential of Sahara Online Mall and got involved early on. Of course, it was useless for him to let his imagination run wild and read the newspapers. He was a senior executive of Sahara Express. He did not know about this, but President Li Long, who had already received equity rewards from the company, did not have the authority to know about this matter? No, I have to ask President Li about it. Mu Yuqing could not calm down. He pushed open the office door excitedly and walked to the floor where Li Long was. The excited Mu Yuqing seemed to have forgotten that he had just scolded the product manager girl with a straight face and told others not to gossip. However, he himself couldn't suppress the fire of gossip that was growing in his heart. Chapter 1099. Yang Yi immediately knew that he was exposed by the Han Sen Entertainment Express again. However, what was interesting was that even though the media reposted and discussed the news, the impact on the public was not as big as when the ownership of Backwave shares was exposed. Maybe it was because everyone was already used to it. This was very similar to the following scenarios. If a celebrity was suddenly exposed to have a lot of shares in a technology company, the media would report about it every day, bragging about how good she was at making money and how she was the best investor among the celebrities. Her fans would also follow suit and exclaim. But even in the technology world, the news of a certain technology company in Yang Yi's previous life controlling 5% of Ubisoft shares didn't cause a ripple in the slightest. In the eyes of ordinary people, they might have only glanced at this headline and said, "Oh," before skipping over it. It was very difficult to attract their attention. The logic was the same. Even though Yang Yi's name still attracted some attention, in the eyes of the public, Yang Yi's ownership of shares in an internet company was nothing special. He was already worth billions. What was the difference if he had a few billion more? As a result, the media was in a frenzy, while the public was in a state of disinterest. After Yang Yi received the analysis report from the company's public relations department, he quickly called Fu Jun to discuss with him. They agreed that both sides would remain silent. No response, no denial, no matter how the media reported, speculated, or excited. That was their own business. The competition in the entertainment industry was very fierce in this world. Ordinary celebrities did not accept interviews or contact the media because they were cutting off their own path of retreat. However, Yang Yi and Murphy were different. They did not have to worry about the media's retaliation. This time, Yang Yi was very familiar with the situation. He bumped into Murphy, who was at the company with her. He swapped his car with Xiao AI's car for the time being. He drove Xiao AI's red sedan and took a detour with Murphy to go home, just in time to avoid the media's encirclement. Of course, this happened in the morning. In the afternoon, Yang Yi received a call from Fu Jun, but this time, it was a WeChat video chat. Didn't he just call this morning? Yang Yi thought that something had happened and quickly connected the video chat. However, before Yang Yi could speak, Fu Jun burst out laughing. "Old Fu, what's the matter? Why are you so happy?" Yang Yi smiled. "It's quite a coincidence. Xiaoyang, wait a moment, I'll show you someone. Do you still remember?" Fu Jun said with a smile. He turned the camera of his phone and took a picture of Li Long and Mu Yuqing, who were sitting opposite his desk. Mu Yuqing was a little reserved. Although there was a smile on his face, he still looked a little nervous and perturbed. Mu Yuqing had only asked Li Long about the actual situation in the morning. Li Long had poached him from his previous company and had a good relationship with him. Hence, the two of them were still chatting and laughing when they talked about this matter. Moreover, because Mu Yuqing was also a senior in the company and had the authority, Li Long gave him an affirmative answer. After that, when he left Li Long's office, Li Long only asked him to keep it a secret. However, Mu Yuqing didn't expect that in the afternoon, when Fu Jun made time to call a few people in charge of the company to come over for a meeting to discuss the strategy to deal with this matter. Li Long told Fu Jun about this interesting coincidence with a smile. This wasn't a big deal. Fu Jun thought it was a little interesting, so he asked Li Long to call Mu Yuqing over. Moreover, after he saw the photo of Mu Yuqing eating with Yang Yi after the signing event, he happily said that he wanted to call Yang Yi and tell him about this coincidence. Fu Jun and Li Long, the two bosses, obviously didn't think much of it. It was just that Mu Yuqing had to suffer. When he faced Fu Jun, the big boss, he trembled in fear, afraid that he would say something wrong. Fortunately, Yang Yi had a good memory. After he saw Mu Yuqing's appearance in the camera, he felt that he looked familiar. After carefully searching in his mind, he had an answer. How can I not remember? Mu Yuqing, Mu Yuqing. Yang Yi said with a smile. 2 years ago, I went to Yongcheng for a signing event and even treated you to a meal. Among my fans in Yongcheng, you're the most influential one. Boss Yang, you still remember me? Mu Yuqing heard this and asked in surprise. Mu Yuqing didn't think that after 2 years, Yang Yi would still be able to call out his name. At this moment, his excitement instantly overshadowed his uneasiness in Fu Jun's office. Fu Jun turned the camera over and pointed the phone screen at Yang Yi. This way, Mu Yuqing could also see Yang Yi's appearance. Yang Yi on the phone screen smiled and said, "Of course, you're my parents. I'm grateful, how could I forget?" Boss Yang, no, Boss Yang, you're too polite. Right now, you, Boss Fu, and Boss Li are my parents. Mu Yuqing recovered from his excitement and said happily and nervously. Fu Jun laughed and put the phone in front of him. He said, "You guys should just call each other your own names. Xiao Yang doesn't like people calling him boss. I think you'll feel uncomfortable calling him that." "Yes, don't call me Boss Yang." "Oh right, old Fu, what's Mu Yuqing doing in Sahara Desert?" Yang Yi asked curiously. "I remember that 2 years ago, when I had dinner with him, he was still the project manager of that messaging technology company." "That's right, Li Long poached him to Sahara Express. He's now in charge of the logistics network." Fu Jun said. Li Long added, "The position of product director." Yang Yi nodded lightly. He told Fu Jun and Li Long to start the logistics network, but he didn't expect Mu Yuqing to be in charge. "Mu Yuqing, I'll call you old Mu like on the forum." Yang Yi asked Fu Jun to look at Mu Yuqing and said with a smile, "The project you're in charge of now is actually quite important. It's related to the important development of the company's logistics in the future. Do it well. If you have any problems, look for Li Long. He's definitely an expert in logistics." Mu Yuqing nodded gratefully. Although after saying this, Yang Yi returned to his original calmness and treated Mu Yuqing as the fan who gave him a lot of support in the past. Both Yang Yi and Mu Yuqing knew that with this relationship, they couldn't go back to the past. Even though Mu Yuqing also took the opportunity to ask Yang Yi a very fanboy question. "Dada Yang, I really want to ask. You haven't released many books in the past 2 years, but you've released many songs. We fans are all looking forward to it. We want to know when your new book will be released." Yang Yi had indeed reduced the speed of releasing books. After all, he didn't need to rely on writing books to earn money now. He would only occasionally release a book if he was particularly interested in it. Of course, compared to many authors, his speed wasn't considered slow. However, compared to the diligent Yang Yi in the past, the current Yang Yi had indeed disappointed his fans. Yang Yi often taught Shi to know how to be grateful. He had also learned this principle himself. His fans had supported him during his most difficult times. Yang Yi didn't want to see their disappointed eyes. Therefore, after hearing Mu Yuqing's question, Yang Yi thought for a while. Fu Jun teased him, "Why are you still releasing books when you're so rich?" He said to Mu Yuqing, "In the second half of the year, you'll be able to see my new book in the second half of the year." This was just a small episode. When his identity was exposed, it stirred up waves in Yang Yi's heart. It was not as big as when she suddenly knocked on the glass door of his bathroom at night. The little girl had already taken a bath before. Before Yang Yi took a bath in Murphy's bedroom, he deliberately went to check on her. He saw that she was still playing in the master bedroom obediently. But just when Yang Yi was trying his best to persuade Mo Fei to put little Momo in the crib, and he took Mo Fei to enjoy the experience of taking a bath in the luxurious bathtub, the little girl suddenly ran out of her bedroom excitedly, banged on the glass door of the bathroom, and shouted, "Papa, Papa, I have good news for you." Chapter 1100. The red rose petals, the illumination of the candles, the swaying red wine glass, and the lips that seemed to be stained with blood. Such an unusual beauty, how could it be missing the charming supercilious eyes of his beloved princess consort? Of course, if she didn't run over and bang on the bathroom door, all of this would be perfect. Yang Yi finally convinced Murphy to take advantage of the fact that the two children weren't paying attention to secretly be romantic and spend some alone time. However, before they finished taking off their clothes, they were interrupted. "Wait, don't rush." Yang Yi didn't know whether to laugh or cry as he looked at Murphy and mouthed to her, She will leave soon." Murphy rolled her eyes at Yang Yi coquettishly. She didn't dare to make a big fuss and just buttoned up her cotton pajamas that had been unbuttoned by Yang Yi to her delicate navel. With her daughter outside, how could the thin-skinned Murphy have the nerve to maintain that state just now? Yang Yi was a little anxious, but at this time, he couldn't care less. He could only turn his head and ask, "Ahem, Shishi, what good news do you want to tell Dad?" That's right, he, I called Lu Weisha. Lu Weisha told me that she's going to come to our place to play during the summer vacation. Papa, I miss Lu Weisha so much. I'm so happy." Outside the door, she was still beaming with joy and said happily, "Oh, Lu Weisha will come to China to play this summer? That's good, but didn't you plan to go to Lu Weisha's house to play during the summer vacation?" Yang Yi asked with a smile. Why did Yang Yi ask this? Because she had already told him about this idea. Moreover, in order to make her father agree to let her go to Sweden to play with Lu Weisha, the little girl had been working hard this semester to save up gold coins. Yang Yi found it very interesting that she would take out her small wooden box every night before going to bed and carefully count the gold coins she had saved. She calculated how many gold coins she had left to exchange for the 50 gold coins that she could use to travel abroad. It had to be said that in order to save gold coins, she would work hard to help her parents with the housework when she was free. Unless she particularly liked a doll, she rarely took the initiative to buy it. Of course, she already had a lot of dolls. After a few months, the little girl had actually saved up close to 40 gold coins. She was about to reach her goal. "Yes, I also want to go to Lu Weisha's house to play. But Lu Weisha is coming to our house to play." Outside the door, she giggled and said, "Then Papa, let me tell you, Lu Weisha said that it would be fun to go to their house in winter. Because there will be beautiful snow and beautiful auroras." The concept of auroras was mentioned by Yang Yi when he told she about Lu Weisha's hometown. When they were chatting, Lu Weisha also showed she photos of auroras. "Well, let's wait until winter to go to Lu Weisha's house to play." Yang Yi looked at Murphy's pretty face, which was as red as the neon at night, and was somewhat absent-minded. "Papa, can I ask you for one more thing?" She pressed her two small hands on the bathroom door again and said seriously, "Well, tell me what it is first." Yang Yi smiled helplessly at Murphy, and then said to she, That's right. Can we visit the doll factory later?" The little girl's voice came in, and it was muffled, as if she had stuck her little head on the bathroom door. "Because I want Lu Weisha to go with us. Lu Weisha has never seen the doll factory, but she said that there is a chocolate factory there." As she spoke, the little girl became excited again, and couldn't wait to describe what a chocolate factory was to her father. "Ahem, she, you can visit the doll factory at any time. You can discuss it with Lu Weisha, choose a time, and then tell Dad." Yang Yi had no choice but to interrupt the little girl, and softly advised, "Go and tell Lu Weisha this good news, Dad also wants to take a bath." She was a little regretful, but she thought of telling Lu Weisha this super good news, and let Lu Weisha feel that her house was very fun, the little girl became happy again, and she readily responded, "Yes, yes. Papa, then I'll go and tell Lu Weisha." Hearing Shi's happy laughter leave the bathroom door, Yang Yi was a little relieved, and he was about to continue to drag Murphy into the water. But at this time, Shi's puzzled voice came from the bedroom. "Hey, where is Mom? Why is Mom missing?" Suddenly, Yang Yi and Murphy froze. Then, Shi asked Tong Tong, "Brother, where is Mom? Why are you playing by yourself?" Mom. Tong Tong also giggled, and no one knew what he was happy about, so he shouted something that no one could hear clearly. "Mama is here." Murphy finally couldn't help it, and she blushed and pulled away Yang Yi's mischievous hand, opened the bathroom door, and walked out. After closing the door, Yang Yi, who didn't know whether to laugh or cry, could still hear Shi's surprised voice. "Hey, Mom, why are you in Papa's bathroom?" The little girl didn't have any special doubts, and she felt that it was like watching a magic show, and it was very interesting to see a living person appear. "Ahem, Mom is tidying up the clothes that you and brother changed out of." Murphy tried to cover it up. In any case, tonight's plan of taking a bath together was ruined, and Yang Yi was a little depressed, so he could only take a bath by himself. Lu Weisha was coming to China with her father to play with her old kindergarten friends. When she brought the news to the school, Yang Luoqi, Chen Shiyun, Nan Zhaoyu, and the others immediately cheered happily. Lan Xian was fine, as she already knew the news. Lu Xiaoyu, on the other hand, was very curious when she saw their big reactions. Shi, is Lu Weisha really a foreigner?" Lu Xiaoyu asked curiously when she returned to the classroom with Shi. "Yes. She is Swedish, and she is very tall." Shi giggled. "Taller than you?" Lu Xiaoyu asked with some surprise. She felt that she was already very tall, and not only was she taller than girls of the same age, but now she was almost the same height as Yu Xiaowei, who was 2 years older than her. "Yes. But Lu Weisha is 1 year older than me." She cracked her fingers and said with some nostalgia, "But we haven't played with her for a long time, and we used to be very close." Shi, how did you talk to Lu Weisha? Do foreigners all speak English?" Lu Xiaoyu was still following her own path, asking the things that she was very curious about. "I spoke Swedish to Lu Weisha. My papa taught me, and now I speak it very well." Then Lu Weisha also spoke a little Chinese, but after she returned to Sweden, she couldn't speak it very well. She explained with some regret. "Speak Swedish? That's amazing." Lu Xiaoyu looked at her deskmate with admiration. Chapter 11:01. The light shadow's footsteps were hurried. Unknowingly, it was already the end of May. After entering summer, the weather in Jiangqing became more and more stuffy, especially since there was no rain for the past few days. During the day, the sun was scorching the land and the campus was also filled with heat waves. It was so hot that it made people panic. "Today, we won't play basketball outside because the weather is very hot. It's not good to get heat stroke." The tall and burly teacher, Lu Dashan, was in the school's gymnasium, talking to the children of the first grade, class 3, who were laughing and joking as they lined up. Quiet, don't make any noise." Chow Rolin, who was shouldering a heavy responsibility, had no choice but to stand up and shout loudly. In contrast, the physical education representative was much more dull. Not only did he not want to help maintain order, but he also stood there and laughed happily, as if he had forgotten his duty. "Well, everyone, please be quiet. Listen to the teacher. We won't play basketball outside today, but come to this comfortable gymnasium. What do you think the teacher is going to teach you today?" Lu Dashan smiled and kept them guessing. This time, it was the teacher's turn to ask questions. Shi, who loved physical education, was especially excited. Her eyes lit up as she tried to raise her arms and said in her sweet voice, I know. We're not playing basketball outside, but in the gym." Not basketball." Lu Dashan scratched his head awkwardly and said, "The basketball court for today's class is reserved for the teachers of grade 2 and grade 5. Today, we are going to learn to play table tennis. Today was not the PE class on Tuesday, so Shishi's PE class was not at the same time as Yu Xiaowei's. Ping pong, ping pong. The reactions of the little guys were different. Among them, some had learned to play table tennis, or had watched others play table tennis on TV, and some were ignorant and had no concept of table tennis. Typical examples were Shi and Du Yuqian. Du Yuqian might have seen others play table tennis, but she stood in the front row of Shi, looking confused, as if she couldn't understand what table tennis meant. Shi's eyes lit up. She clapped her hands happily, then turned to Lu Xiaoyu and said, "Xiaoyu, we want to play table tennis. I also have a table tennis racket at home. My papa bought it last year." Lu Xiaoyu was also beaming with joy. She smiled excitedly and said, "I also know how to play table tennis, because my father and mother both know how to play table tennis. They taught me, and then my father participated in their unit's competition and won the first prize. Win an award. That was too amazing." Shi looked at Lu Xiaoyu in surprise and said enviously, "Wow, little you, is your papa so powerful? Actually, I haven't learned how to play table tennis yet, because I haven't played table tennis with papa yet." "It's okay, I can teach you." Lu Xiaoyu said excitedly, "You can also come to my house. I'll take you to the table tennis place. There are table tennis tables in our community." There was no need for Lu Xiaoyu to teach. After Lu Dashan finished his lecture, he asked the PE representative and two enthusiastic boys to bring back the table tennis racket and table tennis racket. Then, he began to explain the boring table tennis game. She listened carefully. After all, she had only seen table tennis, but had never really played it. After the table tennis racket was opened at home, she didn't know where it was put by her father. After all, there was no table tennis table at home. At most, Shi and Tong would play basketball at most. After the Chinese class, which was probably taught by the PE teacher, Lu Dashan, the children ran out of their lines and happily grabbed the table tennis racket and table tennis racket. Don't worry, there are enough table tennis racket, but not enough table tennis racket. But you can play with 4, 5, or 6 people on a table. One ball is enough. Lu Dashan said helplessly behind them. But the children were noisy, laughing, and shouting, which almost overturned the gymnasium. Lu Dashan didn't know how many children could listen to his words. "Xian Air, Xiaoyu and I, and you and Qian will play together, okay?" After getting the table tennis racket, she paid attention to the teacher's words. After hearing it, she immediately organized. Liao Qian was Lan Xian's deskmate, and she had a good relationship with Shi. So, there were 4 people. Although they were slower than those boys, who were faster than them, the 4 girls gathered around a table tennis table, looking very excited. "I don't know how to play table tennis. This ball is for... Who knows how to play? Open it for you." Lan Xian held a yellow table tennis ball in her hand. But after thinking for a while, she spread out her hand and stretched it out. "Give it to Xiaoyu. She knows how to play table tennis." She immediately pointed to Lu Xiaoyu and said, "Then you can have it." Lan Xian threw it over generously. It was a high toss, but Lan Xin misjudged the resistance of the ball in the air. The ping-pong ball fell down early in the air, crossed the net in the middle, and bounced repeatedly on the ping-pong table with a piak sound. However, this scene was very interesting in the eyes of Shi and the other girls. Although the table tennis ball was bouncing lower and lower, the 4 girls' heads followed the arc of the table tennis ball, up and down, like chickens pecking at rice. In the end, Shi, who was tall and strong, quickly reached out to grab the table tennis ball and handed it to Lu Xiaoyu. She smiled and said, He. You didn't throw it over." Lu Xiaoyu kicked off the table, but to everyone's surprise, it was her first time kicking off, and she didn't play well. The table tennis ball got stuck on the net and bounced back. I'll pick it up. Lu Xiaoyu shouted in embarrassment, and took a big step forward. Ha. Lu Xiaoyu's mistake made the other girls laugh. However, They seemed to have forgotten that they were the real novices. Sure enough, the next time Lu Xiaoyu hit the table tennis ball, Lan Xian and Liao Chanqian waved the table tennis racket in a flurry. As a result, neither of them was able to catch the table tennis ball, which cleverly went between their racket. Lu Dashan, who was patrolling, reached out and picked up the table tennis ball. He walked over and took the table tennis racket from Liao Chanqian's hand, and explained, "You have just started to learn table tennis, so don't be so anxious. First, use this simple method to practice how to play, and find the feeling of touching the ball." What Lu Dashan taught was the most basic ball tossing posture, which he just taught Shi and the others how to toss the ball. Why didn't he teach them the specific movements? Because practicing the movements was very boring, and children at this age didn't necessarily learn the movements from the teacher. Just now, when Lu Dashan taught them how to toss the ball, they were a little impatient after a while. He simply let them play on the table, and then slowly teach them the more difficult movements. After giving Shi and the others some simple instructions, Lu Dashan continued to look at the other children. As for Shi and Lan Xian, they continued to play table tennis in high spirits. However, these simple movements were a bit difficult for the children who were not too tall. Except for Shi, who was taller than Lan Xian and the others, Lu Xiaoyu and the others had to try their best to press down on the table tennis table and stretch out their arms to barely catch some table tennis balls. But even so, they couldn't always catch the table tennis balls, and mistakes often happened. "Hey! Shi, you hit farther away. I'm so tired from picking up the ball." Lan Xian complained a little tiredly. Lan Xian was not as tall as Shi, and her reaction speed was not as fast as Shi's, so she often tried to reach out her hand, but the table tennis ball bounced to the other side. Helpless, Lan Xian could only run over to pick up the ball. After a few times, the chubby girl was out of breath. "Excellent, I'll go pick it up. I'll help you pick it up." Seeing this, Cici called out enthusiastically and ran over, full of vitality. She was now playing table tennis very happily. Although she was only bouncing the table tennis balls high up, she still felt that this sport was very interesting, especially at the moment of determining the landing point, which was particularly exciting. It was precisely because of this that she didn't want to see Lan Xian stop playing with them because she was tired of picking up the ball. Lan Xian's physical reserves were far less abundant than hers, and of course, she knew this. It was just a piece of cake to pick up the ball. Lan Xian saw this and suddenly stopped complaining. She said gratefully, "Oh, that's great. Thank you, Shi. You're welcome." She picked up the table tennis ball, ran back, and stuffed the ball into Lan Xian's hand. She said with a sweet smile, "Xian, when we go back, let's ask Dad to take us to play table tennis, okay?" "Of course, but we can teach my dad how to play table tennis." "My dad doesn't know how to play." "Your dad is so good, he should know how to play," Lan Xian said excitedly. He. Compared to the harmony, happiness, and laughter on the girl's side, the boys' side was more noisy, especially at the table of Chen Yuxuan and Jiang Chen. They even quarreled over the issue of the ball. No one knew the specific process, but in the end, Jiang Chen yelled angrily, "I'm not playing with you guys. I'll go to another table." Chapter 1102. Jiang Chen angrily took his racket and looked for another table. Of course, boys at this age basically didn't like to play with girls, so Jiang Chen also prioritized the boys' table. However, because boys like to be lively, their tables were usually full, and there were 2 substitutes next to them. How could there be room for more people? "I don't want to wait that long," Jiang Chen muttered as he wandered into the girls' group. His eyes darted back and forth before he finally caught sight of a pool table in the corner with fewer people. On this table, there were still 4 clumsy-looking girls playing. Seeing them toss the ball high and then chase after it while giggling, Jiang Chen curled his lips in disdain. Too weak. Therefore, this little boy walked over casually and said proudly, "Yang Shi, I'll play with you. I'll show you what it means to be the best player in the world." Cici and the girls were having a good time, but someone suddenly appeared and interrupted them. The girls looked over in confusion, but they only saw Jiang Chen waving the table tennis racket to act cool. Shi and Lu Xiaoyu didn't react before Lan Xin pouted and said angrily, No, this is where we play. Jiang Chen, don't come over. Why? Jiang Chen asked, unconvinced. Because you're bad. Lan Xin pouted and said unhappily. In fact, Lan Xin was a very generous girl. Just like when they were in kindergarten, Chan Shiyun liked to cause trouble. Lan Xin often quarreled with Chan Shiyun because she didn't like it, but she didn't take those trivial matters to heart. Later, Chan Shiyun was also influenced by her friends, and her personality became better and better. She gradually felt more like a girl, and Lan Xin became good friends with Chan Shiyun. But Lan Xin didn't like Jiang Chen, just like how she didn't like the class leader Chao Rollin who liked to snitch on her to the teacher. There must be some very special reasons. Lan Xin felt unhappy about these reasons, but she couldn't say them out loud. Liao Qianqian helped her to say them out. This girl was usually a little like Yang Luoqi. She spoke softly, but that didn't mean that she didn't dare to speak. Liao Qianqian whispered, because you gave Xian a nickname and the boys laughed at her. When Liao Qianqian said this, Shi also remembered that she had stood up for Lan Xian many times. Xian Air is not a fat pig. She's so thin now. At this moment, Lu Xiaoyu also couldn't help but criticize Jiang Chen. Yes, and Jiang Chen, you like to gossip and bully us. I don't like you either. Perhaps boys at this age had too much energy, but there were also a lot of naughty boys in the first grade class 3, led by Chen Yuxuan and Jiang Chen. Chen Yuxuan was more boorish. His naughtiness was displayed in confrontations with the teacher. He had a lot of appeal among the boys and didn't easily arouse the dislike of girls. Although girls who liked to be quiet and study, such as Shi, didn't want to play with Chen Yuxuan, she didn't dislike Chen Yuxuan. But Jiang Chen's naughtiness was more annoying. He didn't dare to provoke the teacher, but he liked to make other students uncomfortable. In addition to being touchy, his mouth was also very talkative and annoying. Just like what Lu Xiaoyu said, Jiang Chen, in order to show his existence, also said that Lu Xiaoyu was a couple with a boy and spread rumors. This made Lu Xiaoyu very angry. Kids at this age, they were still somewhat sensible. Cici saw that her friends were all indignant, and the scenes that annoyed her when she was annoyed by Jiang Chen's nonsense also appeared in her mind. For example, last month when they first met Shi, Jiang Chen swept up some of the water on the ground after the rain and splashed it on Shi's clean socks. Another example was one time when Shi happily walked past Jiang Chen's table. This guy suddenly stretched out a foot and almost tripped Shi. Although he didn't really want to trip Shi, Jiang Chen stretched out his foot and then retracted it. He just wanted to scare Shi. And Jiang Chen didn't deliberately target Shi. The other pretty girls in the class were also scared by him. It seemed that this would leave a deeper impression on the girls. But this naughty move made Shi very angry. Although the little girl didn't like to complain, she still told her father when she got home. Yang Yi later also talked to the homeroom teacher. After Li Rulin talked to Jiang Chen, he restrained himself a little bit towards Shi. Almost half a month of peace. This was why she wasn't as angry as Lan Xin, Liao Qianqian, and Lu Xiaoyu in the beginning. Back at the table, Jiang Chen grabbed the table tennis racket and froze there. His face was tight and he was obviously embarrassed by the girl's words. I didn't bully you. Jiang Chen stuttered and argued, but he couldn't find an excuse to explain himself. She stood next to Lu Xiaoyu. The little girl didn't want to say anything, but when she saw her deskmate's body trembling slightly, her face was tight, and her lips were pursed. She looked not only angry but also scared. She felt a surge of courage in her heart. Jiang Chen, there are 4 of us, and we don't want to play with you. You should find someone else to play with. She walked in front of Lu Xiaoyu and said seriously. This was a declarative conclusion. With she taking the lead, the other 3 girls all nodded in agreement. Rejected by the 4 girls, Jiang Chen felt embarrassed. He said angrily, "You don't play well." Don't play well? She was a little confused. What did this have to do with them not wanting to play with Jiang Chen? You don't play well, so I have to teach you. You're too stupid. Big idiots. Jiang Chen still felt wronged. In his excitement, there were even some tears rolling in his eyes. We're not stupid. She was a little upset. She said angrily, we all learned very well. Xi and Air can catch the ball too. We're not idiots. I can play too. Liao Qianqian said, little fishy can play table tennis too. Idiots, you're all idiots. I don't want to play with you. Jiang Chen's temper rose. After shouting, he turned around and left. This scene, how similar was it to his argument with Chan Yuxuan and the other boys just now? She was called an idiot by him. Her little mouth pouted in anger and grievance. If Jiang Chen didn't run away, she would probably argue with him. In fact, the four girls were a little angry. However, Lan Xian recovered early. She waved her hand and said excitedly, ignore him. Let's play together. I think, regardless of what he said, we'll all have a good time. Infected by Lan Xian's laughter, Shi's depression dissipated a lot. She shook her little head and recovered her bright smile. Yes. Xi and Air, let's ignore him and play by ourselves. The teacher even praised us. We're not stupid. The children were very forgetful, and the unhappiness they felt just now quickly dissipated in their cheerful laughter. However, Shi's memory was very good. Although she later played table tennis with her friends, when she returned home in the afternoon, when she talked to her father about it, the little girl was a little unhappy and asked, Papa, why did Jiang Chen say we didn't play well? Did he say we were idiots? Don't worry about him. Papa told you and Xi and Air that students like Jiang Chen have some stubborn shortcomings. If you can't persuade him to correct his shortcomings, then don't talk to him. Stay away from him and don't let him affect your normal study and life. Yang Yi smiled, rubbed Shi's little head, and said, just like those reporters. Isn't Papa the same? Since we can't drive them away, then we'll ignore them and live our own lives. All these years, Yang Yi had indeed cultivated his body and mind, becoming a Buddhist celebrity. If it were the year when he first came to this world, those who spent all day secretly taking photos of his daughter would have been killed by Yang Yi. However, Yang Yi's lecture was not what she wanted to hear. She said unhappily, but, Papa, I think a lot of people play really well. Fishy also plays very well. Her papa even won an award. Am I really that stupid? How come? Yang Yi deliberately said in surprise, our she is the smartest child in the world, one of. In the eyes of parents, their children were the smartest, but Yang Yi hesitated and added one of, afraid that she would be proud. It's your first time playing table tennis. It's normal that you're not good at it. But Papa believes that you can learn very well in the future. Better than those Jiang Chen. Yang Yi said encouragingly. Really? She blinked her beautiful big eyes, looked at her father, and asked cheerfully. The little girl's clear big eyes seemed to say, Papa, don't lie to me. Of course I won't lie to you. Yang Yi touched his chin and laughed. You don't believe me? Papa will buy a table tennis table tomorrow and teach you this weekend. After we learn for a while, we'll definitely be better than them. Really? Buy a table tennis table? Wow. Shi's eyes were almost sparkling with excitement. She held her hands and said joyfully, Then I can also let Xi and Air, Fishy, Sister Xiaowei, Chi-Chi, Shiyun, and Zhao Yu come over to play table tennis. She just said that she wanted to learn to play table tennis. How did it become calling friends to play at home? Yang Yi didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He felt that he couldn't keep up with his daughter's jumping thoughts. Chapter 1103. On the weekend, the table tennis table ordered by Yang Yi was finally delivered. Several workers were busy installing it behind the house and under the awning next to the swimming pool. Cici and Lan Xian were especially excited. They swayed from side to side as they watched. The way they swayed their bodies made it seem as if they were also working. Furthermore, they seemed to be even more engrossed than the workers. Shi, come here. Yang-yi opened the door and called Shi. The little girl turned her head and curiously looked at her father. After confirming that her father was indeed calling her, she ran over like the wind with her long legs. Papa. Cece was also brimming with vitality today. Her big black gem-like eyes sparkled with excitement as she shouted in a clear and melodious voice. Yang-yi bent down and handed the tray in his hand to Shi. He said with a smile, "Take these to the workers and tell them, 'Uncle, thank you, you have worked hard.'" Shi blinked and reached out to take it. She said obediently, Yes, Papa, I know." Of course. How could she leave Lan Xian alone? She carefully carried the tray and slowly made her way back while calling for Lan Xian to help her. Lan Xian hurriedly ran over and glanced at the cups of watermelon juice that were filled with disposable paper cups. Yang-yi stood at the back door and could hear the conversation between the two girls. "Wow! Shi, there's watermelon juice to drink." Lan Xian shouted excitedly, "It's so hot, I want to drink watermelon juice." No, this is not for you," Shi quickly said, "this is for the workers." Ah! Lan Xian scratched her head regretfully. However, although she was disappointed, she still took the initiative to say, "Then Shi, I'll help you bring it to the workers. Then we'll drink watermelon juice. There must be more." Lan Xian was not just saying. She also helped Shi pick up 2 cups of watermelon juice, which relieved a lot of Shi's burden. He, how do you know there's more?" She said with a smile while holding the tray and carefully watching Lan Xian's movements. "Because a big watermelon can make a lot of watermelon juice. If there's no watermelon juice, we can also eat watermelon," Lan Xian said with a proud expression. The 2 girls brought the watermelon juice to the workers and naturally received all kinds of praise from the workers. "You're so kind. You're beautiful and sensible. Good girls, thank you." "You're welcome." Shi and Lan Xian were a little embarrassed by the praise. They responded shyly, turned around, and ran away, leaving only giggles behind. Lan Xian wanted to eat watermelon, and Shi also felt that it must be very comfortable to eat watermelon in such a hot weather outside. Yang-yi brought the 2 girls into the house and cut watermelon for them. At this time, Murphy hurried out of the living room and chased them out of the main door. She turned back and saw Yang-yi and smiled unhappily. "Your son took away the green onions at home." "Green onions?" Yang-yi looked out of the side hall's window with some surprise. In the end, he found that the green onions that Murphy mentioned were not symbolic, but real green onions. On the driveway in the villa's courtyard, there was a little warrior holding a green onions upside down. The green leaves were slanted upwards, and the roots were dragging on the ground. This posture was arrogant, just like a swordsman from the end of the world who was about to fight a decisive battle. Of course, if the little guy wasn't wearing pants and only had a thick diaper, he would be even more handsome. "That's my son. I'll play with him later." Yang-yi was overjoyed when he saw this scene and said with a smile, "Play with what?" Murphy rolled her eyes at him coquettishly. She didn't have time to reply, and hurriedly chased after them. "It's okay to play with green onions, but don't wander around without pants." Even though there was a diaper to cover her private parts, Xiao Nuo's short, white, fleshy legs were still exposed. It wasn't difficult to assemble the table tennis table, but this brand did a solid job. After installing the table tennis table, they tested it with various instruments to confirm the accuracy of the table's height, the level of the plane, and the stability of the center net. Only then did they feel relieved to hand it over to the customer. After seeing off the workers, Shi and Lan Xian couldn't wait to play with the table tennis racket that Yang-yi had bought before. "Xian, let me tell you, our table tennis racket is very useful. Look, it's super elastic." Shi showed it to Lan Xian. She gently tossed the ball, and then bounced it with the table tennis racket. The table tennis ball immediately flew high. In fact, it wasn't so exaggerated. The table tennis racket at home was only good because of the friction force of the layer of glue. However, she didn't know how to slice a ball, so she just felt that the table tennis racket was soft to the touch, and was more elastic than the table tennis racket at school. Thus, she had such a preconceived idea. Wow! Lon Xin also exclaimed cooperatively. The two girls bounced the ball back and forth as they chatted with each other in high spirits. This time, Lon Xin also found something different. She, have you noticed that this table sounds very nice? Look at my table tennis, bang bang. Although Lon Xin had dubbed it herself, the crisp sound of the ping-pong balls hitting the table was indeed rather pleasing to the ears. It's true. It's so nice. She also giggled. Tong Tong, who had just been caught by her mother to go upstairs to put on her pants, also walked out of the back door of the villa, and came to the backyard. Seeing her sisters playing so happily, the little girl's eyes lit up, and she ran over happily. If Tong Tong wanted to play other sports, Yang Yi wouldn't mind. But now she and her sisters were playing table tennis, and this racket had a certain degree of destructive power. So when Yang Yi saw this, he quickly reached out and pulled Tong Tong over. What are you going to do? Are you going to play with your sisters? Yang Yi squatted down, took the little boy over, smiled, and reached out his hand to touch his chubby little face. Where is your green onion? Tong Tong was very happy to be teased by his father. He grinned and giggled, dumb insect, Mom. He pointed to the back, indicating that his mother had taken the green onion. Let's go and get it. Daddy will teach you how to fight, okay? Yang Yi purposely used his hand to imitate the edge of a blade, making a series of swishing motions. Of course, his movements were very methodical and looked very exciting. Ha ha. Oh. Tong Tong's eyes were wide open, and he was both surprised and happy. He opened his mouth and laughed loudly, and his little hands were clapping vigorously. So, Murphy washed Tong Tong's clothes and hung them up. When she returned to the backyard, she found that Yang Yi was like a big child, waving his green onion and fighting with his son. Ha 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 ha. Tong Tong only knew how to parry, but he was very happy, and he was laughing so hard that his eyes almost disappeared. Chapter 1104. Playing around was one thing, but she still needed to learn some real skills. Yang Yi didn't want to spoil his daughter and turn her into a useless vase. What's more, she had also mentioned that she wanted to practice table tennis well. Yang Yi called Shi and Lon Xin, who were still playing without any progress, back into the house. He asked them to take a break, eat some watermelon, and watch a video of the table tennis match. On the TV, two Chinese table tennis female players were playing table tennis back and forth. Whether it was the waving of their arms, the jumping of their steps, or the sound of the table tennis, all of it showed the audience an extremely fierce battle. The two young ladies were dumbfounded. Wow! She was even more shocked. She held a piece of watermelon in her two small hands. She had only taken a bite of it a long time ago, but she was so engrossed in watching later that she forgot to eat it. The little girl watched the TV attentively. She opened her small mouth slightly and made a series of exclamations. After watching this edited video, Yang Yi turned off the TV, turned around, and said with a smile, "How is it? Do you think they are very good?" Shi and Lon Xin both nodded in agreement. Lon Xin was busy eating the watermelon. Her small mouth was moving and she didn't have time to speak. She said excitedly, "Papa, these two sisters are so good. I almost couldn't see clearly when they were playing." In order to describe it more clearly, the little girl even put down the watermelon and jumped out of the sofa. She excitedly gestured to her father. That's right. The big sister in black hit the ball over with a whoosh. Before I could see it clearly, the big sister in red hit the ball back. So fast. I think they're really good. Even Xinair and I can't play so fast. Playing so fast, I'll be exhausted. Lon Xin finally finished her slice of watermelon. Her mouth bulged as she said, I feel so scared just looking at it. It's not fun to play like this. They are the best ping pong players in our country. Let alone you, even Dad can't beat them. It's normal for you to think that they are very good, Yang Yi said with a smile. More powerful than Papa? She asked in surprise. The little girl's beautiful big eyes were wide open, as if she couldn't believe it. In her heart, her father was the most powerful. Of course, but this is also related to their long-term training. They have been practicing table tennis since they were young. When they were younger than you, they spent a lot of time training every day. Of course, Yang Yi also had his own pride. He smiled and said, if Dad could have so much training, he wouldn't necessarily be worse than them. This was not the topic they wanted to discuss today. Yang Yi raised his voice with excitement to divert the attention of the little girls. He said with a smile, but anyway, after watching this video, don't you feel that playing table tennis is not just the tossing of the ball that you usually play? If you add a little strength and angle, such as swinging the racket like this and hitting the ball like this, won't it be more beautiful? Yes. She was very supportive. Her little face was very excited as she nodded again and again. Then today, let me take you to play. Let's learn some new skills of playing table tennis, okay? Yang Yi said with a smile. I want to learn. She couldn't wait to jump up in front of her father. Lan Xian didn't say anything. She was busy eating another slice of watermelon. She wanted to play so fast, so she had to quickly replenish her energy. The scene changed. Yang Yi took the two little girls to the table tennis table in the backyard. He asked Shi and Lan Xian to stand opposite him. If you want to play table tennis well, first of all, you have to find a good sense of the ball. Dad has demonstrated this to you in the room just now. When the table tennis ball bounces back, you have to be able to find its position so that you can bounce it back. Yang Yi was referring to the fast-paced table tennis he casually performed in the room just now. So now, let's try the practice of catching the ball first. I will hit the table tennis ball over, and you have to take turns to catch it back. You can use any method, just like you did before. You can bounce it back. But she can hit it. I can't catch it. The table is too high. Lan Xian said with some unwillingness. She is taller than me, so she can catch it. She stood there, scratching her head embarrassedly. It doesn't matter. You have to believe in Dad Yang. Yang Yi said with a smile, I promise I can feed the ball to you comfortably. It started. Like doubles, Yang Yi took turns to hit the ball to Shi and Lan Xian, so that they could take turns to catch the ball. Yang Yi's table tennis skills were actually learned on the spot. But his reflexes and muscle control were better than many people. So when he fed the ball to the two little girls, he could always control the landing point, the angle and the height of the bounce. In this way, whether it was Shi or Lan Xian, they could easily hit the table tennis ball back. Hey! Although she was still a little flustered, she successfully caught the ball 3 times in a row. Lan Xian, who was originally a little discouraged, finally recovered a happy smile. She felt a sense of accomplishment, and her enthusiasm for playing table tennis came back. Of course, in contrast, Shi's figure was more active. The little girl jumped around and actively caught the ball. Even when it was not her turn, when it was Lan Xian's turn, she subconsciously leaned over. When she saw Lan Xian hit the table tennis ball, she came to her senses, smiled, and took back her racket. However, although Yang Yi fed the ball to them just right, the return ball of the two little girls was like a random number, making it impossible to know where it would go. Although the ball was hanging high, the landing point was sometimes far, sometimes close, sometimes left, sometimes right, and sometimes even crooked, and the table tennis ball didn't fall on the table. Yang Yi could only rely on his long legs and arms to quickly reach the landing point of the ball and hit it back. After practicing like this for a few rounds, Yang Yi began to let the two little girls, who were in the mood to play, change the way they held the racket. Just like holding a sword, you hold the racket like this, and when you see the ball bouncing here, you hit it back at an angle. Just keep this posture, move your body, and wave your arms. Let's experience this kind of playing posture, okay? Yang Yi walked over and guided the two little girls step by step. It's fun. And it's very nice to play. Those big sisters on TV play like this. She waved her arms excitedly and showed it to Lan Xian. But it's a little heavy here. Lan Xian also followed suit, but her hand was a little small, and she felt that holding the table tennis ball with one hand was not very strong. Moreover, the racket was heavy, and it was not as comfortable as the straight racket she could hold with her left hand. Xian Air. Play like before. You can try to use this different angle to hold the ball, so that the ball doesn't fly so high, and can cross the net. Yang Yi also tried his best to teach Lan Xian. Papa, then what about me? She saw that her little friend happily changed back to the original posture, and she asked with some confusion. Yang Yi said with a smile, you play like what Papa said just now. Whether it's the horizontal racket or the straight racket, in fact, you can play table tennis. It mainly depends on your reaction speed and the feeling of playing. Okay. I'll use the straight racket. I think it's super awesome, and those big sisters are very good at playing table tennis. She waved the racket in a decent manner, and said happily, this is called the horizontal racket, not the straight racket. Yang Yi hesitated for a moment, and corrected this wrong concept to his daughter. Horizontal racket? She blinked her big bright eyes, and looked at her father in confusion. The little girl couldn't hold back her words, and when she had a question, she would ask it. She saw that she stretched out her arm in confusion, and then asked, Papa, why is it the horizontal racket? You see, my hand is straight. This is a good question. Yang Yi laughed. In fact, he also felt that this naming method was a little awkward. Chapter 1105. Previously, Yang Yi had promised Lan Xian that he would bring Murphy's concert in Taiwan, which was scheduled for the beginning of June. However, for this concert, Murphy had prepared for a long time. Yang Yi had also studied and practiced with her. They had even prepared a few new songs for this concert. After all, this concert was held in Baobei City, Taiwan, which was also Murphy's hometown. It was also the place where Yang Chongguei had stayed for a few years before he went abroad. Therefore, this concert was of great significance to both Yang Yi and Murphy. It was worth mentioning that for this trip to Taiwan, although Yang Chongguei was not willing to go with them, Shishi's grandfather, Mo Henian, and grandmother, Zhou Mengyu, would go back to their hometown to visit their relatives. It could be said that they were returning home with honor and glory. Therefore, at the end of May, on the Wednesday after Yang Yi had bought the table tennis table, Mo Henian and Zhou Mengyu flew back from Dazhou. They planned to visit their grandson and granddaughter first and stay in Zhongqing for more than a week. They would then go to Taiwan together the following weekend. Mo Henian rarely returned to China. Zhou Mengyu, on the other hand, had come back twice in the past year. The first time was when she had to go back to Harbor City, so she took a detour to Zhongqing to visit her grandson and granddaughter. The second time was when one of her sisters opened a clothing store in Shanghai. She came back to support her, so she also made a trip to Zhongqing. However, both times, Zhou Mengyu was in a hurry and left after a day or two. On Wednesday morning, Yang Yi and Murphy brought Tong Tong, who did not need to go to school, to the international airport in Zhongqing's Binhai district to pick up their grandparents. The old man was still dressed in a cowboy outfit. It was inconvenient to wear a cowboy hat, so he held it in his hand. However, the dark-colored checkered shirt was obviously matched by Zhou Mengyu. The color of the shirt looked mature and not old-fashioned. When they walked out of the passage, from afar, he looked like a fashionable old man who refused to admit his age. However, upon closer inspection, Mo Henian was still as stern as before. When he saw Yang Yi, he even snorted softly to express his dissatisfaction. Although the old man was a farmer in America, he was not uninformed. Of course, he knew about Yang Yi's current net worth. However, it was also because he knew that Yang Yi was definitely one of the richest men in China that Mo Henian was unhappy with Yang Yi. This was the same reaction that Mo Henian had when he first found out that Yang Yi and Murphy were together. When his son-in-law was still a poor boy, that was his first impression of Yang Yi, his grandfather was worried that his daughter would not have enough food to eat and warm clothes to wear. Now that his son-in-law had become rich, the old man was worried that the rich man would turn bad. He would be pursued by a group of women and spend all day outside. His daughter would be wronged because of this. Of course, Zhou Mingyu had also asked Murphy this question on the phone. Knowing that Yang Yi was still the same as before and had never left the three of them to spend time outside, they were relieved. However, he would still be unhappy if he had to be. Did a father-in-law need a reason to be unhappy with his son-in-law? Yang Yi had already understood the old man's character. He did not care at all. Moreover, he had even brought the family heirloom. Yang Yi took Tong Tong from Murphy's arms and smiled as he held Tong Tong's hand and said, "Tong Tong, greet Grandpa." Although they hadn't seen each other for a year, it wasn't like little Wanqing hadn't seen his grandfather before. Usually, when Mo Fei had a video call with her mother, she would pull little Wanqing over and let him say hello to her grandparents. Otherwise, how could Tong Tong have learned to call them Grandpa and Grandma at such a young age? However, Tong Tong was a little reserved now. It seemed that this was the first time he had seen his grandpa in person. When Yang Yi went to the US last year, Tong Tong was still too young. He was only a few months old, so how could he remember? His eyes were wide open, and he pouted his watery little mouth. He was only focused on looking at his grandpa and trying to distinguish between them, so he did not call him grandpa out loud. When he saw Tong Tong, the unhappiness in Mo Henian's eyes instantly disappeared. His stern face became gentle. He smiled and reached out his hand. "Tong Tong, come and give Grandpa a hug. Let me see if you have gained any weight." What an amazing observation angle. When Tong Tong heard this, he instinctively rejected. He turned his little head and reached out to hug his father's neck. He did not want to be hugged by anyone else. "Are you still shy?" Zhou Mingyu walked over with a smile. She also reached out her hand and said, "Tong Tong, let Grandma hug you, okay?" Of course, he could hug his grandma. Tong Tong had played with his grandma in February this year, so he had a familiar impression of her. He looked at his grandma for a while, then decisively abandoned his father and went into his grandma's arms. The little fellow was hugged by his grandma. He twisted his butt and felt that it was the same sitting position that he was familiar with. He immediately calmed down, as if he had regained his liveliness at home. He grinned and pointed with his finger as he said to his grandma, "Grandma, Mom, Papa." "Grandpa too," Murphy reminded him. Tong Tong tried to recall his grandma's and grandpa's facial shape and appearance. He nodded and said in a childish voice, "Grandpa, there's Tong Tong. Our Tong Tong is so smart. He can already speak so much." Zhou Mingyu was grinning from ear to ear. Murphy smiled and said, "Actually, he can speak a lot. For example, he can learn to say what he wants when he eats, what he wants, and what he wants. He might be a little embarrassed today, so he didn't say anything." Mo Henian watched and listened from the side. Although he was laughing happily, his heart was itching. In the end, he couldn't hold back and asked again, "Let me hug Tong Tong." "Let Grandpa hug him, okay?" Murphy hurriedly asked Tong Tong. Tong Tong's feeling of unfamiliarity faded a lot. He nodded and said, "Okay." Mo Henian's wrinkled face immediately bloomed into a smile. He reached out and picked up Tong Tong, weighed him, and patted the little fellow's butt. He looked at Tong Tong with a smile and said, "You've grown up. When Grandpa saw you last year, you were still a little thing. Now you're so heavy." "Yes, he's quite heavy. Grandma can't hold him anymore." Zhou Mingyu joked a little exaggeratedly. Then, she smiled and said to Murphy, "I always feel that Tong Tong is heavier than little Lulu. Fei Fei, do you still remember little Lulu? Your Aunt Yun's granddaughter. She's 2 months older than Tong Tong. She's not just heavy. I saw the photo she sent the day before yesterday. Our Tong Tong is even taller than her granddaughter." When Yang Yi heard this, he immediately came over and said, "Dad, if you think he's heavy, let me help you carry him. Mohenian was a little unhappy that his flattery didn't work. He held Tong Tong with one hand and waved his other hand. Go, go, go. Do whatever you need to do. I'm not so old that I can't even carry my grandson. Tong Tong didn't know whether he understood or found the bickering between his grandpa and his dad very interesting. He giggled in his grandpa's arms. Chapter 1106. It was not easy for Mohenian to hug his grandson. Tong Tong was now full of energy and liked to run around and explore things that interested him. Therefore, the little boy was quite obedient at the airport. But when he got home, he began to be unwilling to be held and twisted his body, wanting to get down. No, no, hug. Tong Tong mumbled as he tried to break free from his grandfather's grip. Duh, duh, duh. Mohenian had no choice but to put him down. Tong Tong's happy smile returned, and he bounced his little butt as he ran to Dodo, who had just jumped down from the tree. Compared to the other two cats, Dodo's personality was cold and gentle. Usually, when Shishi's little friends came to the house, Dodo was not willing to play with them and would hide away without a trace. However, Dodo was very patient with Tong Tong. Even if Tong Tong grabbed Dodo's tail, Dodo would only turn its head to look at Tong Tong. Obviously, Dodo knew that Tong Tong was chasing after it, so it slowed down and waited for Tong Tong to catch up. Then, it twisted its tail and crawled between Tong Tong's legs. Although Tong Tong could not catch Dodo and was circled around by Dodo, this was just a game between Dodo and Tong Tong. The little guy giggled happily. Grandsons were no match for granddaughters. In the evening, Shishi came back from school. Before she got out of the car, she eagerly clung to the car window and shouted excitedly, "Grandpa! Grandma! Grandpa! Grandma!" After her father parked the car, the little girl jumped out of the car with her little backpack and happily pounced on Mohenian. The old man's face immediately bloomed with a smile again and hugged this little cotton-padded jacket. "I also want to hug Grandma," Shishi said with a grin. "Good, good. My Shishi is so sensible." Zhou Mingyu smiled and reached out to hug Shishi. However, she almost didn't manage to hug her. After all, Shishi was already a big child. In the end, her grandmother only hugged her for a while before putting the little girl down. Shishi did not mind. After Lan Xin greeted her grandparents, she could not wait to drag them home. Each of them held one hand, and Shishi skipped in front. Zhou Mingyu's backpack. How could the old people bear to see their granddaughter carry such a heavy backpack? They could not wait to help her carry everything. Of course, when Yang Yi, who was about to send Lan Xin home, saw this scene, he secretly sighed in his heart. Luckily, the old people didn't let the old people take care of the child. Otherwise, with this kind of spoiling, Shishi will really think of herself as a little princess. Although Shishi usually liked to imagine herself as a cute little princess in her diary and sometimes when she wrote short stories, in reality, Shishi was not pretentious at all. She did not have princess syndrome at all. This could be seen from how she usually helped her parents with the housework. However, Yang Yi would not spoil the fun and criticize the old people now. After all, the old people rarely came once a year. Let them dote on their granddaughter. She did not know what her father was thinking. She knew that her grandparents were coming today, so she had a lot to say. At this moment, she was talking to her grandfather with joy. "Grandpa, let me tell you. Today, I told little you that my grandfather was coming to see me." Then little you asked, "Is your grandfather the one who has a deer at home?" "There's a deer at home?" Mohenian was on the farm. Usually, the farm work was complicated and busy, so he had somewhat forgotten about this matter. Fortunately, Zhou Mingyu had a good memory, so she reminded him with a smile, "It's the deer that you brought back when little Yang and the others came last year." "Yes." She nodded and said, "I also call it Little White, because it has very beautiful white spots on its body." Oh. Mohenian remembered and said, "That deer. Later, it grew up a little, so we put it back in the forest." "I know. When Papa told me about it, I was so sad. Shi's mood was a little low, but soon, she thought of the topic just now and giggled in high spirits. I told little you about it. Then little you asked, "Is there a dear's grandfather at home?" It turned out that the little girl felt that the description of her deskmate was very interesting. "Who is little you?" Zhou Mengyu asked curiously. "She's my deskmate. She's also very nice, and her papa is a policeman." She always felt that policemen were very powerful. With Shi at home, the atmosphere suddenly became lively, and Tong Tong came to join in the fun. "Grandpa, let me show you a ping-pong performance." After asking her grandparents to sit down, Shi ran to the side hall excitedly and took her ping-pong paddle and a light ping-pong ball. "Wow, this is awesome. Shi, you can play ping-pong now?" Zhou Mengyu applauded with a smile and praised. Yes. I'm the one who learned it. Dad also taught me." The little girl shook her little but embarrassedly and said shyly, "Grandma, if I don't play well, can you let me try again? I've just started learning." "Of course, Grandma will accompany you and watch you play ping-pong. You can play it very well." Zhou Mengyu said with a smile, "Don't worry, Grandma is looking forward to it." So, Shi performed a ping-pong ball for her grandparents. It had to be said that although Shi was a beginner, her reaction speed was not bad. Moreover, she exercised with her father every day, so her body coordination was also very good. She performed 20 ping-pong balls for the first time. Yes. That's very good." Zhou Mengyu was a little surprised and applauded for Shi with a smile. "Actually, I can do 32 at most." She pursed her lips and explained seriously. Mo Henian said loudly, "Then continue to work hard and break your record. Don't talk about this. The child is already doing very well." "How old is she?" Zhou Mengyu said angrily. She was worried that her granddaughter would be tired. After Cici continued to perform table tennis excitedly for a while, Mo Fei, who had just come over with a plate of fruit, smiled and said, "Cici, since you have performed for Grandpa and Grandma, why don't you let your younger brother perform for Grandpa and Grandma?" "Okay." She agreed without hesitation. Her voice was crisp and pleasant, but soon she fell into hesitation. "But, what should my brother perform?" Without waiting for Murphy's reminder, Shi's eyes suddenly lit up. She giggled and said, "I know. My brother can dance." Under the expectant gazes of Mo Henian and Zhou Mengyu, Shi ran to her father and asked for his phone. Yang Yi's phone had songs in it. Shi found the song, "The King Sent Me to Patrol the Mountains," that she had recorded with her father a few years ago and clicked play. Not only were the lyrics funny, but the melody was also very rhythmic. It was like a dance song that made people want to stand up and dance. When Tong Tong heard the song, his eyes lit up. He even waved his little hand happily. "Brother, get up. Let's dance for Grandpa." She put her phone on the coffee table and excitedly pulled Tong Tong up from the carpet. After little Momo stood up, he looked up at his sister. When he saw his sister twisting and dancing, his interest was completely aroused. He giggled and raised his little hands high, as if he was dancing ballet. However, his feet were dancing in small steps like tap dancing. With a twist and a twist, Xiao Tianguan danced happily. It even giggled as it circled around its sister. Although it was an impromptu and random dance by the little girl, the excitement still made the two elders laugh heartily. Yang Yi and Mo Fei also sat on the side. While watching, they smiled at each other and held each other's hands. This song was actually very meaningful to Murphy and Yang Yi. The first time Yang Yi sang this song for Shi was the morning after Yang Yi proposed to Murphy. At that time, they were still living in the small building above the coffee shop. After that, Murphy also practiced this song with Shi and sang it for Yang Yi on his birthday. Listening to it now, it was full of memories. Shi, who was still a little girl at that time, was now a big sister who could dance with her little brother. Of course, no matter how fast time passed, the wonderful thing was that the family was still happy together. Chapter 1107. After Yang Yi bought the ping-pong table, Shishi wanted to invite her friends over to play ping-pong. Although Grandpa and Grandma were coming over to stay this week, Shishi didn't think it would affect her. She still sent out invitations to her friends in high spirits. On Saturday morning, Lu Xiaoyu, Yu Xiaowei, Chen Shiyun, and Nan Zhaoyu were all sent over by their parents. The only exception was Yong Luoqi. The little girl had relatives coming over today, so she couldn't leave. Nan Zhaoyu was the last to arrive. As soon as he entered, he saw Mo Henian, who was holding a pair of large scissors and trimming the flower bed. The old man glanced at him and coolly pressed down on the front of his cowboy hat with his finger. The corner of his mustached mouth curled up slightly, and it could be considered a cowboy greeting. "Whose gardener is so cool?" Nan Zhaoyu was dumbfounded. He stood there in a daze, as if a few Remingtons were poking at him, stupidly motionless. "Zhaoyu, you're here too." She cheered and happily welcomed him with her friends. Lu Xiaoyu bounced beside Shi and said with a smile, "Nan Zhaoyu, you're being rude. You didn't even greet Shi's grandfather when you saw him." Nan Zhaoyu finally came back to his senses after being reminded by his friends. He scratched his head and looked at Mo Henian a little embarrassedly. He said softly, "Hello, Grandpa." "No, you're not calling him Grandpa." Yu Xiaowei, who was 2 years older, corrected him rigidly. She calls him Grandpa, but we should call Shi's grandpa, Grandpa Mo. That's more polite. She didn't think much of it at first. She blinked her big eyes and looked at Sister Xiaowei in surprise. Not only was she surprised, but she also admired her. "Sister Xiaowei knows so much. It's because I read a lot of books." "It's okay, Shi. You can read more extracurricular books in the future, and you'll know a lot of things." Yu Xiaowei honestly explained and comforted Shi, as if she was afraid that Shi would be discouraged. Seeing this, Nan Zhaoyu could only obediently change his greeting, "Hello, Grandpa Mo." "Yes, they're all good kids." Mo Henian couldn't be serious. He smiled and pointed at the villa. "Go inside and play. Your Granny Zhou has prepared a lot of snacks that she brought back from America." Yes. Let me tell you, it's delicious. I've eaten a lot these few days." Lon Xian's eyes lit up and she shouted, Let's go back to the house." Thus, the children chatted and laughed and ran back like a swarm of bees. Lon Xian led the way while she blended into the crowd. At first glance, Lon Xian looked more like the owner than Shi. However, on Thursday morning, when Lon Xian came to school with she tried some American chocolates, soft candies, nuts, and other snacks that she didn't have time to take out for her the night before. After that, she couldn't wait to stay at Shi's house. Zhou Mingyu was very enthusiastic about the children. She took out a few cans of snacks and asked the children to eat. If Yang Yi wasn't worried that they would eat too many snacks and not have an appetite for lunch, the children would probably be eating snacks for the whole morning. It was a pity that Zhou Mingyu couldn't spend more time with the children. After she greeted them for a while, she took her bag and said goodbye to the children. Then, she went to the studio's recording studio with Murphy to practice singing. Yang Yi also prepared a new song for her. When the time came, Murphy would invite her mother to sing this new song with her at her concert in Taiwan. This was a small gift that Yang Yi and Murphy prepared for Zhou Mingyu. Zhou Mingyu used to be a small singer, but she wasn't very famous in Harbor City. Naturally, she didn't have many opportunities to hold a concert. Murphy's gift could be said to be helping her mother realize her dream. "You all can play in the house first. Your Grandpa Mo and I are trimming the branches next to the table tennis table. When it's done, I'll let you play table tennis. Shi, you have to take care of your brother and play with Momo." "Okay." Yang Yi reminded the little guys. Although Mo Henian couldn't stay idle and wanted to do something, Yang Yi couldn't leave his father-in-law to work outside alone. He greeted the children and walked out of the door again. This was nothing. The children were playing in the house, and he and Mo Henian were working in the yard. They could take care of them, so there was no need for them to sneak out of the yard. Moreover, Shishi's friends were quite well behaved. They had come to the house to play so many times, so they could be considered regular guests. Yang Yi was more at ease. After Yang Yi went out, the children began to discuss heatedly again. Wow, Shishi, your grandparents are really cool. Chen Shuyun said enviously, my grandparents aren't so awesome. They're all old. Yu Xiaowei nodded and said in agreement, that's right. My grandmother is also at home, but I still feel that Cici's grandfather and grandmother look young. I like Shi's grandfather very much. He's very handsome, and he wears a hat. Nan Xiaoyu's eyes were blurred, and he sighed with fascination. He, let me tell you, my grandfather also bought a cowboy hat for my brother and me. When she heard her grandfather and grandmother being praised, she also felt honored. She said with a smile, it's my grandfather's farm. Many people wear cowboy hats because the sun is very hot. She felt that it was not enough to just talk about it, so she ran upstairs excitedly. In the master bedroom and the guest bedroom, she found her and her brother's cowboy hats and took them down to show them to her friends. Tong Tong was originally in Yu Xiaowei's arms. Yu Xiaowei was 2 years older than Shi. Although she was not much taller than Shi, she was much more mature than Shi. Tong Tong felt very comfortable being carried by Yu Xiaowei, and he did not struggle to get down from the sofa. He was playing with a toy car in his hand, and Sister Xiaowei held another one for him. Little Wanqing felt that he cooperated very well with Sister Xiaowei. He stuffed the little cart in his hand into Sister Xiaowei's hand, and Sister Xiaowei helped him hold it. If he wanted to change to another one, Sister Xiaowei would also obediently let go of her hand. So comfortable. At this moment, Tong Tong heard some noise and saw his biological sister running down the stairs wearing a cowboy hat. She was holding a small cowboy hat in her hand. Tong Tong immediately recognized the small cowboy hat. There was a simple drawing of a cow's head on it. His father had drawn it for him. The hat. The little guy grinned and pointed to his cowboy hat. Yes, cried the little guy. Yes, it's yours. She walked over and helped her brother put on the hat. She even naughtily covered her brother's eyes with the brim of the hat. Then, she giggled and ran away. Luckily, Yu Xiaowei was also smiling as she helped Tong Tong adjust the hat. Tong Tong did not know what he was thinking. He took the hat off his head and grabbed it with his small hand. Then, he turned around and crawled out of Sister Xiaowei's arms. This little fellow took advantage of his young and ignorant age to grab Sister Xiaowei's clothes and stand up in Sister Xiaowei's arms. Luckily, Yu Xiaowei had a gentle personality, so she did not push him away. He. Tong Tong's eyes curved into crescents. After he stood up, he looked at Sister Xiaowei's pretty face and grinned foolishly for a while. Then, he put the hat on Sister Xiaowei. The hat was naturally not suitable for Yu Xiaowei, so it could not cover her head. However, Yu Xiaowei did not mind. She could feel Tong Tong's friendliness, so she pursed her lips and smiled gently. Tong Tong was quite satisfied with his wonderful idea. After he received Sister Xiaowei's response, he happily waved his 2 small hands and giggled with her. The happiness on this side was faint, but Shi's side was much more lively. Shi, help me put it on. Chen Shuyun shouted excitedly. I want to try it on too. Lu Xiaoyu also said excitedly. Including Nan Xiaoyu, who admired the cowboy costume, the few children fought to be the first to put on the cowboy hat. After they put it on, they tried to act cool. Shi, can you take a picture for me? Chen Shuyun was the first to put on the hat. She made a cool pose and asked, still not satisfied. She had a camera, and she knew how to take pictures. This was nothing new among these children. Okay. She answered sweetly. But I have to go upstairs to get my camera. I'll go with you. I want to take a picture with your doll. Chen Shuyun shouted. I'll go too. Thus, the little fellows ran up like a swarm of bees. Chapter 1108. While the children were playing in the villa, Yang Yi was wearing a straw hat and holding onto a ladder as he accompanied Mo Henian to trim the branches and flowers in the yard. It had to be said that the weather today was indeed hot. Although Yang Yi and the old man were wearing wide-brimmed hats, their backs were soaked in the hot sun. "Dad, do you want to take a break? Let me help you," Yang Yi said with a smile as he stood on the lawn and held onto the ladder. "No need. You're still young and haven't done any heavy work." Mo Henian panted slightly as he scolded them. Yang Yi could only smile bitterly and didn't dare to talk back. The old man's temper was a little stubborn. Actually, there were specialized gardeners in the villa area who would come every week to trim the flowers and plants. However, the frequency of this kind of tree trimming was not that high. Usually, they would only come by once every month or two. Of course, if you wanted, you could get someone to help you with the gardening at any time as long as you paid. However, as an American farm owner, Mo Henian was used to being self-sufficient and working with other cowboys. He just rolled up his sleeves and started doing it himself. It had to be mentioned that although Mo Henian and Yang Chongguei were both stubborn and didn't like to be extravagant in their lives, there was still a difference between them. Mo Henian liked to ponder over the details while Yang Chongguei, although an old man from the countryside, was still a proud young master in his bones. If it was the same kind of gardening work, if Yang Yi suggested that the whole family roll up their sleeves and get it done, the two old men might help out. However, just like before, if Yang Yi suggested that the gardeners do the work, Mo Henian would complain about it and feel that the others couldn't do it as well as he could. On the other hand, Yang Chongguei would probably just nod his head casually and walk away with his hands behind his back. The attitude of a young master from a big family would inadvertently reveal a little at this time. Of course, this was a little far-fetched. Yang Yi still had to think of a way to convince his father-in-law. "Dad, I'm also from the countryside. Why don't you take a break first and have a sip of tea under the shade of a tree and watch how I do? Since you have experience, wouldn't it be better to give me some pointers from the side?" Yang Yi said with a smile. Mo Henian pondered for a moment. "This idea is not bad. Teach this kid a lesson. Otherwise, when I return to the US, who will work for me? Moreover, he could also temper this brat's temperament." "Humph, so what if he's a billionaire? Isn't he my son-in-law?" Thus, Mo Henian came down. He sipped a few mouthfuls of tea under the awning at the side. Unable to stay idle, he came over to help Yang Yi hold the ladder. While giving Yang Yi pointers, he chatted with Yang Yi. "Mommy is too young, so I won't talk about it. How do you plan to arrange she's education?" Mo Henian asked. "The country has been developing well these years, but when it comes to education, I always feel that it's a little lacking. Over the years, many of Baobei's relatives have approached me to find out more about sending their children overseas. If you plan to send her overseas to study, I can also contact a good school for you. Over the years, I've helped the family a lot. I know which schools are good and which are not." Although Yang Yi did not think that overseas schools were good, the old man did mean well. Thus, he pondered for a moment before replying with a smile, "Dad, she is actually quite happy to be studying in the country now. You see, she has so many friends. If you ask her to study in the US all of a sudden, she probably won't be able to adapt and won't be able to leave these good friends behind. Also, we've arranged for her to go to the best private school in the country. The teaching resources there are not bad. Therefore, I think that if the goal is to broaden her horizons, it's better to let her finish her basic education in the country. She can then consider going overseas for her future studies." Mo Henian did not really mind. He nodded slightly, agreeing with Yang Yi's arrangement. Children indeed need to have more social interactions. The children on our farm often run around with the children in town. In terms of character, they are much better than the children in the city who stay at home all day. Look at the US, there are so many autistic children. Mo Henian sighed as he spoke. It was unknown whether he was wiping sweat or feeling sad. He gently wiped the corners of his eyes before saying, when she was overseas, Murphy said that she was worried that she would not dare to play with other children because she did not have a father. She was afraid that she would be autistic. Now that I see so many of her friends coming over to play with her and smiling so happily, I'm relieved." Although the old man didn't criticize Yang Yi, his words still faintly revealed a hint of resentment. In the past 2 years, it had faded quite a bit, but thinking back to that time, Mo Henian still felt a little unhappy. Yang Yi remained silent for a while before saying softly, "Dad, don't worry. We're heading in the right direction now. Things are already very good now. In the future, our lives will definitely get better." The autistic young lady that the grandfather was worried about was currently surrounded by a group of children laughing and joking. She, I want to take a picture with the panda." Nan Xiaoyu, who was wearing Shi's cowboy hat, waved at Shi, who was holding her card camera, as he walked excitedly to the large panda doll placed beside the bed. Lan Xan, who was digging through Shi's bookshelf, saw this and immediately shouted, No, this is what I want to take later. I want to take a cowboy picture with the panda." "Alright then, you take a picture with the panda. I'll look for something else." Nan Xiaoyu could only pout and change his target. Shi, on the other hand, enthusiastically helped him find a doll. In her super big bedroom, there was no lack of all kinds of dolls. "Xiaoyu, how about this? I once bought it from my papa. It's 18 little monk dolls." She excitedly took out 18 palm-sized dolls from the cabinet and shook them in front of Nan Xiaoyu. Don't be fooled by the appearance of these 18 little monk dolls. In fact, they were from a very popular domestic cartoon. Each little monk was made into a cartoon image. They were very cute and were very popular among children. In order to buy these 18 little dolls, she pestered her father for a long time before her father agreed to exchange a very small amount of gold coins for the entire set of dolls. "Okay. Shi, help me set it up." Nan Xiaoyu really liked it. He stood beside the desk in high spirits with his hands in his pockets, making a pose. At this time, Lan Xian finally found a jar of nut snacks on Shi's bookshelf that she put there 2 days ago. There were almonds, cashews, peeled macadamia nuts, and so on. They all tasted very good. Lan Xian was worried that if she brought them home, her parents wouldn't let her eat them, so she hid them at Shi's place. However, she was very generous to her good friends. Moreover, since it was such a big jar, Lan Xian felt that it wouldn't be a problem to share some with everyone. Therefore, after the little girl took it out, she acted as if it was her own home and asked her friends to eat. "Xian, help me get some, I want to take a picture." Nan Xiaoyu saw that everyone was eating and praising the snacks. He also felt a little hungry, so he quickly called out, I'm coming. Lan Xian grabbed a few cashews and ran over noisily. She glanced at Nan Xiaoyu standing with his hands in his pockets and said enthusiastically, "Come on, open your mouth. I'll let you eat." Nan Xiaoyu opened his mouth, and Lan Xian directly stuffed all the cashews into Nan Xiaoyu's mouth. Suddenly, Nan Xiaoyu could only whimper. His mouth was stuffed full and he couldn't speak. She was busy setting up the little monk. She looked up and saw this scene. She couldn't help but giggle and say, "Xiaoyu, you can't take pictures like this. It's too ugly." Nan Xiaoyu still couldn't speak. He could only chew hard with an embarrassed look on his face. At this time, Lu Xiaoyu wandered over to Shi's dressing table near the bathroom in her big bedroom. "Hey, Shi, what's this?" Lu Xiaoyu exclaimed in surprise. She found a set of makeup tools on the dressing table that she had never seen in Shi's room before. Chapter 1109. Here. Compared to the liveliness upstairs, the living room downstairs was much quieter. Yu Xiaowei was sitting on the sofa, and in front of her, little Momo was flipping through his toy basket. Fortunately, the little guy was wearing pants today, and not just wrapped in a diaper and wandering around. Tong Tong wanted to play with Sister Xiaowei, so he took out all his toys. There were some transformable Autobots, various car models, robot models, and some dolls that he got from his sister. After searching for a while, he stood up excitedly and took out his favorite Autobot and passed it to Sister Xiaowei. "Okay." Yu Xiaowei's voice was soft and gentle, and Tong Tong felt comfortable listening to it. However, when he saw that Sister Xiaowei was only holding the Autobot in her arms, he became anxious. No, no. Tong Tong waved his little hand and walked over. He pouted his little mouth and taught Sister Xiaowei how to play. Oh, so you can transform like this. Sister Xiaowei's surprised voice rang in his ears. Tong Tong raised his little head and looked at Sister Xiaowei's face. He grinned happily. I have this. Tong Tong excitedly took out another transformable robot and gestured with Sister Xiaowei. He wanted to use these two toys to fight with Sister Xiaowei, but Sister Xiaowei did not understand. He could only try his best to explain with his hands and feet. Yu Xiaowei and Tong Tong played downstairs for a while. Tong Tong was still in high spirits, but Yu Xiaowei was a little reserved. Why isn't she coming down yet? Yu Xiaowei turned around on the sofa uneasily and turned her head to look at the stairs. Shi and Tong Tong had been upstairs for too long, and this made Yu Xiaowei feel very insecure. After all, this was not her own home. Although there was still a little girl who pestered her to play, without her best friend, Yu Xiaowei felt like she was lost in a maze when she was alone in such a big house. Finally, Yu Xiaowei could not stand it anymore. She stood up from the sofa and reached out her right hand. She whispered, "Mommy, let's go upstairs and find Shi, your sister, okay? Don't play with the toys anymore?" Tong Tong blinked and put down the robot in his hands. He naturally held Sister Xiaowei's hand and climbed upstairs step by step with her. She would not have known if she did not look, but when she did, she was shocked. Pushing open the door to Cici's master bedroom, Yu Xiaowei was instantly dumbfounded. She saw her friends who had completely changed. Chen Shiyun's eyebrows were drawn thickly, and she was also wearing lipstick. Moreover, it was a dark blood-red lipstick. However, Chen Shiyun did not know how to apply lipstick at all. She painted the skin around her mouth bright red, making it look as if her mouth was a size bigger. Lan Xian had also put on some makeup. She loved eyebrow pencil and eyeshadow. That's right, she had drawn herself into the shape of a panda. She had huge dark circles under her eyes and looked silly, but she didn't mind at all. Instead, she proudly showed it off. The most flirtatious was Nan Xiaoyu. Wait, what happened? 10 minutes ago, Lu Xiaoyu found a set of makeup tools on the dressing table. Shi's dressing table only had some skincare products and hairbands. Lu Xiaoyu screamed as if she had discovered a new continent. Due to the nature of Lu Xiaoyu's work and family habits, Lu Xiaoyu's parents had always been barefaced and did not wear makeup, so Lu Xiaoyu found it very novel. Lan Xian ran over first. After taking a look, she replied loudly, "These are makeup tools. Lipstick, eyebrow pencil. My mom has them too." Cici, who was arranging the little monk doll, raised her head and glanced at it. She giggled and said, "This is my mama's. Because my grandmother's mirror is very small, Mama and my grandmother put on makeup here." To be exact, Zhou Mengyu was the one who taught Murphy how to put on makeup. When it came to fashion, whether it was clothes or makeup choices, Murphy could not compare to Zhou Mengyu. While she was taking photos of Nan Xiaoyu, the other girls were excitedly trying out the makeup products. Chen Shiyun and Lu Xiaoyu were the most curious. Lan Xian casually opened a lipstick and applied it on Lu Xiaoyu's hand to let her feel the color. Wow, it's so beautiful. Lu Xiaoyu really liked this kind of shiny pink color. As a result, their exploration of cosmetics went out of control. 10 minutes later, Yu Xiaowei went upstairs and saw this scene. The three girls were not the only ones who put on makeup. She was not spared either. The little girl's forehead was drawn with an eyebrow pencil. Then, she asked Lan Xian to draw 3 whiskers on each side of her face with pink lipstick. He. Lu Xiaoyu giggled and said, Shi, you look like a tiger." "No, I'm a cat. A very cute cat." She opened her 2 paws and played with Lu Xiaoyu, who had put on lipstick and smoky makeup by accident. Of course, the girls had all put on makeup, so how could Nan Xiaoyu be spared? He subconsciously wanted to escape, but in the end, he was pressed onto the dressing table by Chen Shiyun. Chen Shiyun and Lan Xin excitedly carried out a tragic makeup experiment on his face. This powder is good. When we performed in kindergarten, the teacher put it on our faces. I remember. Use this to put it on. Is there any black lipstick? I think black lips look good too, Chen Shiyun muttered. How can there be black lipstick? Lipsticks are all red, Lan Xin said. She listened to their discussion and her eyes lit up. She came over and suggested, I have an idea. We can use this black pen. When Yu Xiaowei came in with Tong Tong, Shi and the girls were still working on Nan Zhaoyu's face in full swing. However, the scene in front of Yu Xiaowei was enough to make her dumbfounded. What's going on? How long has it been? Why do the girls look like they just came back from a trip to the fairies' cave? Their appearances have all changed. Tong Tong's eyes widened. He didn't react for a moment. If he hadn't been so close to Sister Xiaowei's thigh, he would have run away when he saw these strange people. Sister Xiaowei, come in and play with us. She had been looking at Nan Zhaoyu's appearance and laughing happily. Now that she heard the commotion behind her, she excitedly waved at Yu Xiaowei. For Shi and the girls, the significance of putting on makeup was nothing more than playing around. Perhaps they didn't even feel like they were putting on makeup. Instead, they felt like they were scribbling. It was just like painting. The makeup was their brushes and paints, and their faces were their natural canvas. What could be more interesting than painting, where they could let their imagination run wild? Of course, Yu Xiaowei was 2 years older than Shi and the girls, so she faintly felt that it was inappropriate for them to be fooling around like this. However, she wasn't a tough person. When her friends called her, she pursed her lips and joined in. Little brother wants to draw too. Little brother wants to be a kitten like me. She hugged Tong Tong and giggled. Tong Tong carefully looked at his sister in front of him. He finally recognized his sister. When he let out a long sigh of relief, he clapped his hands and chuckled. Oh, how did my sister become like this? Yang Yi was trimming the branches outside. After he replaced his father-in-law, he sped up. After a while, he finished trimming the trees beside the swimming pool and the table tennis table. Mo Henian didn't stay idle either. He swept the cut branches and leaves to one side. Only the front yard was left. Yang Yi asked his father-in-law to go back to the house to rest. Then he planned to call the kids, who had been clamoring to play table tennis since the morning, out to play. However, when he returned to the house, Yang Yi was surprised to find that there was no one in the living room. Chapter 11:10. You guys. What did you do? It wasn't easy for Yang Yi to find someone in the master bedroom. In the end, when he saw these little demons and ghosts, he almost couldn't believe his eyes, including Cece. Were these little guys captured by the demons and released after changing their appearances? Yang Yi originally wanted to scold them, but when he saw the excited and nervous expressions on their colorful faces, he couldn't bring himself to reprimand them. He felt both angry and amused at the same time. In the end, Yang Yi pointed at the little ones, who had all kinds of makeup on their faces, and didn't know whether to laugh or cry as he said, "All of you, hey, come out and stand in a row for me to see." After the commotion died down, Cece, Lan Xin, and the others finally realized that they seemed to have gotten into trouble. They lowered their little heads and shuffled to the side with embarrassed expressions on their faces. Since they had to stand in a row, they hoped to stand in a corner so that they would receive less attention. On the other side were Lu Xiaoyu, Chen Shiyun, and Nan Zhaoyu. In the middle was only Yu Xiaowei and Tong Tong, who was quietly hiding beside Sister Xiaowei's legs. Tong Tong also felt that something was wrong. He tried to hide behind a tall sister, thinking that he could avoid his father's sight. However, he didn't expect that they would end up in the middle, and Tong Tong would naturally appear in his father's line of sight. Yang Yi widened his eyes and pointed at Tong Tong, who looked like a little kitten, and said, "Hey, you're here too." He didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Tong Tong also had a few strands of his beard, but perhaps because he felt uncomfortable, Tong Tong unintentionally wiped it. In the end, the color became a mess on his face, and there were lipstick stains on his sleeves. Being laughed at by his father, Tong Tong embarrassedly hid behind Sister Xiaowei and smeared some lipstick stains on Sister Xiaowei's clothes. Yu Xiaowei's expression was the most flustered. She felt that Yang Yi was going to fly into a rage when he asked them to stand in a row. Yu Xiaowei, who was more mature, felt very guilty at this moment. Her eyebrows drooped, and her eyes were red with tears. Yu Xiaowei didn't notice Tong Tong hiding behind her at all. Her heart was in a mess, and she almost burst into tears. Xiaowei, why are you crying? Yang Yi squatted down and rubbed Tong Tong's hair in annoyance and amusement. Just now, he thought that Yu Xiaowei's face was red because she was wearing makeup. Moreover, as soon as he asked this question, Yu Xiaowei sniffled and tears fell from her eyes. Hearing that Yu Xiaowei was crying, Cici and Lan Xian, who were trying their best to hide to the side, no longer cared about themselves. They quickly surrounded Yu Xiaowei and said with concern, "Oh, Sister Xiaowei, don't cry." Fortunately, the current Yu Xiaowei was no longer the Yu Xiaowei that she had just met last year. The Yu Xiaowei was a lot more cheerful and was willing to explain. Uncle Yang." The little girl sobbed and explained, "Don't be angry, okay? I know I was wrong. Please don't stop me from playing with Shi." It turned out that Yu Xiaowei had been frightened by Yang Yi. "Yang, I didn't do anything." Perhaps because Yu Xiaowei was antisocial when she was young, she didn't like to play with other children. Other adults also thought that she was mentally ill, so they told their children, "Don't play with that Yu Xiaowei." These things had left a deep shadow in her heart. Now, Yu Xiaowei was also very scared. She was worried that she would be too naughty this time and make Uncle Yang Yi say such things. Of course, Yang Yi wouldn't do that. He had originally made the little fellows stand in a row because he wanted to see how much trouble they were causing. At the same time, he wanted to reason with them. But now that he saw Yu Xiaowei so scared, he was too embarrassed to blame them. How could it be? Why wouldn't Uncle let you play with Shi? Yang Yi smiled and said, "You and Shi are very good friends." "Yes, Sister Xiaowei and I are very, very good friends." Cici hurriedly nodded at the side. When she saw that Yu Xiaowei was crying, she was also a little worried. The originally cute kitten was now worried and pitiful. She mustered up her courage and said, "Papa, don't be angry with Sister Xiaowei, okay? You can be angry with me. It's my fault. It's also my fault. I used Shi's grandma's cosmetics first." Lan Xian also stood by her little friend and supported her. She hesitated for a moment, then pouted and said, "Papa Yang, how about you punish me by not allowing me to eat snacks for a week? But don't blame Sister Xiaowei, okay?" These two little girls, they're starting to talk about loyalty? Yang Yi still had a bit of the underworld aura. Of course, he appreciated Shi and Lan Xian's bravery. However, in order not to let the little guys have too much psychological burden, especially Lu Xiaoyu and Nan Zhaoyu, who were still scared and didn't dare to say a word, Yang Yi smiled and said, "Who said that I want to blame you when I let you stand in a row? Of course, it's still wrong for you to play with other people's cosmetics privately. It's just that this is the first time you've made a mistake, so I forgive you." Yang Yi glanced at the card camera that Shi put next to him, then smiled and took it. He shook it at them and said proudly, "But since you've already painted your faces like this, you can't let it go to waste, right? Uncle Yang will take a photo of each of you as a souvenir." "Okay." "Take a photo?" "Okay. She saw that her father wasn't angry anymore, so she immediately became happy and rushed to answer. Lan Xian also shouted excitedly, "I want to take a photo too. Papa Yang, take 2 more photos of Zhaoyu." We've painted him the most." Nan Zhaoyu's cheeks were covered in rose-colored blush. This blush was rarely used, because Nan Zhaoyu's cheeks looked like they were floating in the high plains. In addition to the blush, his lips were still black, as if he had eaten something poisonous. The most flirtatious thing was that some little girl suddenly had the idea to paint pink lipstick on his eyebrows and the eyelids under them. Yang Yi couldn't bear to look at this scene. However, Nan Xiaoyu didn't resist. He just scratched his head shyly and whispered, "Uncle Yang, these photos, can you not let my father see them?" Yang Yi held back his laughter and said, "It's okay, I'll take photos for you and save them. When you grow up and don't remember this, I'll show them to you and let you see how you played around in your childhood. I'll let you be happy now, but in the future, you'll be dumbfounded." Yang Yi thought evilly in his heart. "Papa, do you want to take photos for little brother?" Obviously, Shishi's attention wasn't here at the moment, so she asked curiously. "Of course, how can I leave Momo behind?" Yang Yi laughed. "Then, I want to redraw little brother's face. His face was erased, so it doesn't look good." Shishi looked at her father with pleading eyes and said, "Papa, give us a little more time, okay?" "Of course, do as you please." Yang Yi generously waved his hand and said cheerfully. Tong Tong blinked innocently. His little hand was still holding Sister Xiaowei's clothes. Yu Xiaowei had stopped sobbing. When she heard that Uncle Yang didn't blame her, she felt that the atmosphere among her friends had become warm again. She was happy and touched, so she pursed her lips and smiled. In the evening, the children who had washed off their faces were taken home by their parents, while Yang Yi was at home, being chased by the flustered and exasperated Murphy. No, honey, listen to me, the situation was out of control at that time. When I saw their faces were red from the makeup, I was dumbfounded, so how could I stop them in time?" Yang Yi chuckled as she ran for her life. "But don't worry, I've already left evidence. When they grow up in the future, you can take these photos to them. Tell them, quickly compensate Auntie for her cosmetics. You're still quibbling, you must have a part in it too." Murphy angrily chased after him and angrily said, "Last time in the TV station's lounge, who was the one who broke several of my lipsticks? Cough, cough, it's such a long time ago, why are you still bringing it up?" Yang Yi dryly laughed. "Humph, Yang Yi, you're a man with a criminal record, I don't believe your nonsense at all. You're framing the children, Shishi is fine, but you're framing Momo. I don't believe it. I'm innocent. Ah. Chapter 11:11. Murphy's concert at Baobei Station had been closely watched by the media for almost half a month. If it was just a normal concert, even if Murphy was the most popular diva in the Chinese music industry, it would still be difficult to attract the media's attention. However, according to the venue in Taiwan, Yang Yi had spent a lot of money to set up special effects that were comparable to the Spring Festival Gala for this concert. In addition, Taiwan was Mo Fei's hometown, so this situation was not a secret. Naturally, the media was very curious about what kind of tricks Yang Yi would play in this concert. In addition to the equipment at the venue, there were also many interesting news reports. For example, the 6 people of the Limit Challenge had already arrived in Baodao. In addition to recording a special episode, their agent also revealed that the 6 people of the Limit Challenge, including Yang Huan and Zhu Jie, would be attending Mo Fei's Baobei Station concert as special guests. Another example was that a reporter had received an affirmative answer from Chan Yijie. "I received an invitation, so of course I will attend. I will attend all 3 events." In addition to Chan Yijie, there were also Taiwanese singers, Qin Yu, who had gained a new lease of life through I Am a Singer, and Yang Yi's own group of folk singers, Thousand Miles Creek Tree, who were currently popular with folk music fans. They all announced their itineraries on micro-broadcasting, "See you at Baobei." Obviously, this was a very high-standard concert. Not only were the Taiwanese fans excited, but the other fans who had gotten tickets to this concert also couldn't wait to book tickets to Taiwanese. They even expanded their itinerary to include sightseeing and food. After all, Taiwanese was famous for its tourism resources. Just like before, on Friday afternoon, after Shi and Lan Xin finished school, Yang Yi picked up the 2 girls. They didn't need to go home, so they left Wuhu District directly and went to the airport in Binhai District to meet up with Murphy, Tong Tong, and the 2 elders. This time, Murphy went with the big group because the concert was scheduled for next Monday. In fact, Monday to Wednesday was the Dragon Boat Festival holiday. With the 2-day weekend, this short holiday was enough for many fans to arrange their itineraries. Of course, since Murphy was leaving now, there was enough time for her to arrange the rehearsals for the concert. Taking a plane was nothing special. After all, it took less than 2 hours to fly from Chongqing to Baobei. It was much more comfortable than flying from Chongqing to Chengdu. This time, Tong didn't feel sleepy when she got off the plane. She was in her mother's arms and she looked around energetically at the fans and reporters who came to pick her up. It was so lively. Outside the airport, it was simply a sea of people. Little Momo was curious and nervous as she lay in her mother's arms. She didn't dare to move, but her round eyes kept moving around and looking around. Taiwan was Murphy's hometown after all. The number of fans who came to pick her up was several times larger than the number who came to pick her up in Chengdu. The local police had already been dispatched to maintain order. However, it had to be said that although there were a lot of fans outside the airport, they were all very well-mannered. They did not crowd out through the passage that was guarded by the police. They just stood where they were and happily held up the flags, slogans, and even lit up support signs that they had prepared. The words on the signs were quite interesting. Murphy, welcome home. Murphy, you are the pride of Taiwan's children. Yang Yi, Treasure Island son-in-law, multi-talented, we love you. This big slogan even had rhymes. Unfortunately, they just held it up and didn't shout it out. There were also support signs with Shi and Tong's names. It seemed like these were really hardcore fans. When Murphy saw this scene, she was so touched that she couldn't help but cover her mouth with one hand. Her eyes were glistening with tears. When she was young, she used to come back to Taiwan during the holidays. However, after she debuted, she was very busy with work. Moreover, Taiwan's entertainment industry was leaning towards China, so she rarely came back to her hometown. She really didn't expect that her hometown fans would prepare such a big welcome ceremony for her. When Yang Yi saw this, he let the two elders hold on to Shi and Lan Xian while he took over Tong. He wanted to give Murphy some space to thank her fans. However, they didn't expect that the surprise wasn't just limited to these slogans. Before Murphy walked up to say something, someone in the line of fans suddenly shouted, 3, 2, 1. After the countdown ended, hundreds of fans sang Murphy's song in unison. For you, I used half a year's savings to cross the ocean to see you. This song was written by Yang Yi for Murphy. It could be considered one of her famous songs, so it was very appropriate to use it here. In an instant, Murphy, Yang Yi, and Zhou Mengyu, who were behind her, were all touched. Thank you everyone. Murphy smiled as she wiped away her tears. She wasn't good with words, so she didn't know how to thank them. She could only bow gently and say, thank you for your constant support. In the future, I will definitely come back often. If there is a chance, I will continue to hold concerts in Taiwan. As it was inconvenient to bring the children and elders, Yang Yi and Murphy thanked their fans and got into the nanny van driven by the bodyguards. The nanny van slowly drove out of the airport. The fans behind them didn't disperse for a long time. Returning home in glory, this is how it should be. Earlier, Mo Henian didn't say a word and solemnly acted like a family head. However, when he got into the car and the windows were slowly closed, he couldn't help but sigh. Old Master Mo had a big farm in America and was considered a successful person in his hometown. However, when compared to the attention that Murphy received when she came back, the difference was obvious. Papa, how is this returning home in glory? I'm just here to hold a concert. Mo Fei shook her head and said honestly, I'm not here to show off in front of the villagers. Mo Henian was fuming, but before he could say anything, Zhou Mingyu pulled Murphy's hand and said with a smile, just let him show off for a while. This person is usually very prideful. It's rare to have a chance to show off, so of course, he has to grab it. How am I showing off? Mo Henian said resentfully, when am I prideful? You don't understand. This time, they didn't have to stay in a hotel. Mo Henian had an ancestral house in Bao Bay. Although it looked old, more than 10 years ago, Mo Henian had made some money from his farm in America and had come back to renovate it. However, although the renovations were done by others, the interior design and structure of the house and yard were all done by Mo Henian himself. With his architectural design ability, his old profession, this small courtyard was also a unique place. Moreover, as they planned to come back to live in these few days, Mo Henian had asked his relatives to come over and help clean and tidy up the house. Therefore, as far as the eye could see, the house was clean and the yard was like a garden, with green plants and paths complementing each other beautifully. Lon Xian, who was picky, couldn't stop praising, "Wow, what a beautiful house. Xian, can I stay in the same room as you?" Cece's footsteps were light as she ran ahead excitedly. After looking around, she ran back and said while blinking her big bright eyes, "I saw a room with a bed next to the window, and there were many books on the wall." Okay. Lon Xian agreed. She believed in Shi's taste, and the little girl also liked to stay with Shi, so that they could whisper for a while at night. Yang Yi followed them to take a look and found that it was a combination of a study and a bedroom. The space was not very big, but the layout was relatively clean and tidy. Moreover, outside the transparent window was a beautiful small courtyard. Now that the lights illuminated the whole courtyard, it looked really beautiful. "You want to sleep here?" Yang Yi still felt that this place was a little small, so he said with a smile, "You can sleep in the bedroom inside. This bed is a little small." Of course, it could still accommodate the two little girls. Yang Yi was just worried that the degree of comfort was not as good as a real bedroom. "Oh no, Papa, I like this room. There are so many books. Papa, I like to read." She pouted and shook her little head. Perhaps this was called each flower in each eye? As soon as she arrived, she felt that this room was suitable for her, so naturally, she was not willing to change. Yang Yi could not persuade Shi and Lon Xian, who agreed with Shi, so he had to go to the bedroom and bring in a softer bed, quilt, and pillows for Shi and the others to change. How could Yang Yi bear to let his daughters sleep on this kind of simple bed that was not meant for people to live in? After Murphy bathed the two little girls, Yang Yi came to visit again. Seeing that the two of them were laughing and playing together on the bed and were not afraid of the strange environment at all, he was relieved. "Turn off the light and go to bed early," Yang Yi reminded them and then went back to his and Murphy's room. Chapter 11-12. Mo Fei and Yang Yi were still the busiest when they were traveling with 3 children and 2 elderly people, even if they were accompanied by assistants and bodyguards. After returning to the Mo family's ancestral home, Murphy and Yang Yi worked around the clock. They bathed the 3 children, coaxed Tong Tong to sleep, packed the luggage, hung up the clothes they brought, and many other chores. The assistants and bodyguards were arranged to stay in a nearby hotel. They were not so pretentious as to stay in their own house with a personal assistant. So, they had to do these things themselves. After Yang Yi came back from visiting Shi and Lon Xian, Murphy was finally free to rest on the sofa in the bedroom. However, Yang Yi saw that she was still very energetic. It seemed that her excitement of returning to her hometown and touching the familiar furniture had not subsided. "Why are you so happy?" Yang Yi sat down beside Murphy and asked with a smile. "Because I suddenly remembered a lot of memories when I returned to my hometown," Murphy said softly with a smile in her eyes. "Didn't you say that after your debut, you rarely came back to Bao Bei?" Yang Yi asked curiously. "Yes, after my debut, I was busy with work and did not come back for a few years. After she was born, I did not bring her back either. At that time, she was too young and I did not want to take her everywhere," Murphy said with emotion. "However, when I was young, every spring festival or when my father was on vacation, we would come back to Bao Bei to visit our relatives. So, I left a lot of memories here." Yang Yi remembered that Murphy had said that she was very cheerful when she was young. However, she had been treated unfairly in the entertainment industry in Harbor City, so her personality gradually became cold. So, Yang Yi smiled and said, when you were young? That must be very interesting memories. Murphy reached out and intertwined her fingers with Yang Yi's. Her eyes were filled with memories as she shared with Yang Yi, yes. At that time, our ancestral home had not been renovated yet. It was an old house that had been there for decades. My grandmother was still alive at that time. She lived in the room that my father and mom were sleeping in tonight. Speaking of her grandmother who had passed away, Mo Fei was a little sad, and the fatigue in her body also came up. Yang Yi felt sorry for his wife, so he reached out and put his arm around her shoulders. Murphy lay in Yang Yi's arms. She was used to this. She found the most comfortable pillow position on Yang Yi's thick chest, then she raised her head and smiled softly at Yang Yi. Mo Fei continued, pointing at the ceiling with her finger, "Then the room we are sleeping in now is still the room that was left for me before, but it was not so big before. Later, my papa redesigned it and combined the two small rooms, mine and my cousin's room, into this big bedroom." Murphy had told Yang Yi about the Murphy family before. After her grandmother passed away, the ancestral home was left to Mo Henian, and the family factory was left to Murphy's uncles. Later, the development of the manufacturing industry in Bao Bay was not good, so they moved the factory to the mainland. At present, Murphy's uncles also lived in the mainland. What about the furniture? Is it the old furniture? Yang Yi pointed to the cabinet and the big bed in the middle and asked. After hearing Yang Yi's question, Murphy was a little surprised and said, "Yes, how did you know? The cabinet used to be in my room, and the bed was made when my papa and mama got married. It's a very solid wooden bed. My papa felt that it was a pity to change it, so he kept it." Yang Yi smiled and said, "I can see that. These pieces of furniture look old. They don't fit in with the design of your father's house. Compared to them, the other pieces of furniture are much more harmonious." It was past 11 o'clock in the evening, but the two were not sleepy. Instead, the more they talked, the more energetic they became. They snuggled together on the sofa and continued to talk about Murphy's childhood. Mo Fei's memory wasn't as good as Yang Yi's. She only remembered a lot of things from her childhood after coming here. "Actually, when I was young, I was not as obedient as she. Murphy smiled embarrassedly and said, "At that time, when we came back to Bao Bay in the summer, I did something that almost made my father anxious." "What was it?" Yang Yi asked in surprise. "My cousin is much older than me. Then he and a neighbor's brother, I forgot to call him Awei, or Awei's brother, liked motorcycles very much. Motorcycles are banned in Zhongqing." Murphy was worried that Yang Yi would not understand, so she explained, "But there are no motorcycles that big. Bao Bay is more crowded, so most of the motorcycles people use are small women's motorcycles." "Yes, I know." Yang Yi smiled and nodded. He had seen it in the movies. "One night, I heard them say that they were going to take a motorbike to Keelung to watch the sunrise. Then I ran over and asked them if they could take me along." Murphy smiled embarrassedly and said, "I was only 5 or 6 years old at that time, so I didn't know much. I simply thought that my cousins were very awesome, so I often followed behind them. Going to Keelung to watch the sunrise was the coolest thing they did, so I wanted to follow them even more." "And then? You went to Keelung with your cousin and brother Wei?" Yang Yi asked, his tone a little jealous. Some people said that husband and wife looked more and more alike, and Yang Yi was the same. After living with Mo Fei for so many years, although they didn't look more and more alike, their personalities had become a lot more similar. No, they looked exactly the same when they were jealous. Murphy could naturally tell. She smiled and said, "Aya, don't be jealous. I rode on my cousin's motorbike, and brother Wei drove his own. Plus, my cousins were all older than me by more than 10 years. Let me tell you, at that time I was also I didn't know how crazy I was. I left in the middle of the night, then went to Keelung early in the morning to watch the sunrise. On the way back, I bumped into my dad and uncle, and they came over in a car. Yang Yi could not help but feel jealous. He complained, 'You're too bold, running out in the middle of the night when you're only 5 or 6 years old.' Okay, don't be angry. I know I was wrong. Murphy saw this and immediately sat up, holding Yang Yi's hand pitifully. However, before the two of them had time to talk about this matter clearly, there was a knock on the door of the room. What was it? Yang Yi and Mo Fei both stood up in confusion and opened the door to take a look. Lan Xian, who was wearing pajamas, was standing barefoot on the wooden floor outside. The little girl looked scared and trembled as she stood outside. Daddy Yang, sob, I'm scared. I don't dare to sleep. When the door opened, Lan Xian could not wait to jump into Yang Yi's arms. Her body was still trembling as she cried, "Window, it's too scary outside the window." You're tuning in to the Narrate and Escape YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.